podcast like it. You want a podcast like it? Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. Just podcast like it. Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. You want a podcast like it's 1999.
Hello and welcome to Podcast Like It's 1989, the podcast where we talk about the films of 1989. Staying awake late here in 2021. I'm one of your hosts, Kenny Neibart.
And I'm Phil Iskov.
And with us today for the first time together. Are the hosts of You're Missing Out and our best podcast friends, Mike, Natale, Tom Lorenzo. It's so great to have you guys.
It's great to be here. Yet another winner that I'm showing up for.
Well, I will also say,
you're showing up for the series.
Kenny said that we're staying up late. It's later for you guys, so we do very much appreciate that you've decided to hop on the mic with us at 11 p.m. on a Friday to talk Freddy, but we appreciate it.
What else was I going to do? Destroy my fucking body again? Drink until 4 a.m?
Yeah.
That's what Saturday's for.
Yep.
I feel like I need to say this right off the bat. I'm not a horror person, as our listeners probably know. I'd never seen a Nightmare on Elm Street film prior to this episode. I watched all of the Freddy movies outside of Freddy vs. Jason because Kenny told me I didn't have to.
Whoa. Big mistake.
In terms of completists, I'm sorry. But he told me I didn't have to, and I was fine with that. Because I have to be honest, by the end of this franchise, I was a little worn out. I was a little done with Freddy Krueger by the end of this franchise.
Which is honestly kind of funny, since if you didn't get to Freddy vs. Jason, you ended on what maybe the best one. Well, wait, you skipped Freddy vs. Jason when you went to the remake?
Yeah.
So that's a big mistake.
Which I've never seen. Mistake. But
all right, here's my hot take.
Okay.
Yeah. Hot take, the remake is better than half of the 80s movies.
Madness. Now, can I weigh in 1 second for everyone and for the benefit of your audience, folks? I need to say something right off the bat, because we're talking about canon and we're talking about franchises.
Yep.
And I know that I have a reputation for coming in with too much research. But I want to be upfront with your audience and let them know I had a lot of things going on. I've actually started a new job. I can't talk about it, but I've started it. So this will not be an appearance where I sound like I'm about to jump off a bridge, unlike every other one.
He is dressed like Freddy Krueger right now, for those who are not.
Phil, you did it. This is the second time. Make them pay for it. Make them pay for it.
Well, they're already paying for it. This is Patreon.
Yeah, well, he needs to let people know that are only listening to the audio when they're driving to work.
Correct.
You need to look at what if Freddy Krueger was hocking tires for Michelin.
So let me just say there's an expectation on my part for heavy amount of research, and I've been so busy. I was only able to watch all of the original films, Freddy vs. Jason, the remake, all 44 episodes of the Freddy's Nightmares television series that are canon, because there are several episodes that fill in Freddy's backstory despite being an anthology series. The first 2 issues of the Marvel Comics and Freddy's hour-long MTV special. That's all I was able to do this time.
So can I? Okay, here's a question for you.
And as usual with me, I watched the first 5. Yeah. Got so fucking annoyed with having to watch 4 and 5 again that I said, "Fuck this! I'm just gonna watch the rest of the movie segments on Never Sleep Again," because I didn't want to watch Freddy's Dead again. Freddy's Dead can go fucking die in a ditch. I hate that movie.
Great flick.
Yeah.
I really, the thing I lament the most is I ran out of time. I would have watched Never Sleep Again, but it's 4 hours.
They basically go half an hour into every movie, which is great for a psychopath like me who has no, social life other than drinking myself into oblivion. But hey, what are you going to do?
Now, what if I could offer you guys something else, which is instead of that, just give yourself 44 minutes and I will send you the episode of Freddy's Nightmares that stars a young actor named Brad Pitt. Now, does that entice you? Yeah.
I would watch that. I'd watch
Where
that.
do you, all right, so let's, obviously, I am most intrigued by Freddy's Nightmares. What network was it on? When was it on? Tell me more about Freddy's Nightmares.
This was between 4 and 5, right, Mike?
Well, it started in 88. The first couple episodes were 88, ran through 89, 90, maybe a couple were in 91, but it was mostly in that chunk of time there. It's an anthology horror series that was introduced. Each segment, it would tell 2 stories an episode, interrelated stories. They were all set in Springwood, and the premise, especially for the first season, is that they would all involve nightmares, right? And Freddy would introduce each segment, and in a couple episodes, he actually is a character, but they're all kind of in the universe in their own weird way. I was under the impression, because it's mostly just Freddy showing up and doing like a Crypt Keeper shtick of, always chew with your mouth closed. That's not really a pun.
Bitch.
I didn't have it. But it's always something like that, I don't know why that was the first one. I'm so sorry. I'm so tired.
That was fantastic. Couldn't have asked for a better.
I mean, by the end, they get there. Yeah. But I thought it was like a Crypt Keeper knockoff. And then Tom informs me that this series actually precedes Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, it does, definitely. Because that was definitely insane. In the 90s, yeah.
That was 90s, yeah.
Because in that case, I think the series, I liked the series anyway.
It's groundbreaking.
It's interesting to watch. But yeah, it rules. And they've got a lot of great people in it. Brad Pitt, John Cameron Mitchell from Hedwig and the Angry Inch is in the second
James
episode.
Bond.
Well, yeah, George Lazenby shows up at one point.
Of course.
It's kind of wild. The very first episode is directed by Tobe Hooper, and it's telling Freddy's origins. Not the stuff you see in like Dream Child. It's basically like it shows the trial.
Well, which origin? Because
I was gonna say this guy's origin is all over the fucking place.
When you watch this fucking series, when you watch these movies in a row, you're just like, oh, they're just do these
no
filmmakers,
continuity.
Do these filmmakers not watch the prior ones because it's like, oh, Freddy's, the bastard son of 100 maniacs, and other times it's like, nah, he was just Alice Cooper's asshole kid.
That's true. I think both things could be true at the same time.
He also got ditched on prom, and then comes back to haunt the girl that ditched him on prom night in one of the season 2 episodes of Freddy's Nightmares. Just want you to know he's that petty. I just want that out there for everyone.
Well, if I got ditched on prom, I wouldn't get ditched on prom, ladies. I would certainly become the super Jeffrey Epstein.
Guess who's got 2 thumbs and 4 claw fingers and did get ditched on prom?
Oh God!
This guy.
Wait. All right, so you got ditched on prom.
Yeah.
And
this episode is already off the rails.
You didn't start murdering.
No, I went to go see Grindhouse instead. That's what I did.
You're such a young man. What did you do? So, and that's how you just coped by watching Rose McGowan with a shotgun leg?
Let's go with that. I have a job now, so I'm not going to say something. You're always listening.
Job. All right, so
you're always listening.
Let's.
I told you, Phil. This episode was going to be something else, man.
Yeah, but but I know it's 11 o'clock where you guys are. But we got to stay awake, okay? That's the whole point of this.
I'm going to do like Rooney Mara and I'm going to take this.
Last time you were on.
And I'm just going to start lighting myself on fire.
That's right. That's the only thing you can do. Tom, the last time you were on our 89 podcast, you called your shot and you said, I have tattoos of these maniacs on my body. I need to do an episode of one of these maniacs. We had 3 potential maniacs and I threw in summer camp, which got no votes. It's Sleepaway Camp 3.
But very few.
The 3 maniacs are 3 kind of classic 80s slasher maniacs.
Your Mount Rushmore of
3 of them. Yeah. Who would you say is the 4th on the Mount Rushmore, guys?
I think a lot of people would say Leatherface, but I'm honestly going to go ahead and say Chucky.
Yeah, I don't.
Interesting.
I think the Leatherface thing is absurd. Tom and I talked about this recently. The Leatherface thing is absurd because you have you have Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a foundational film. But then you don't get the second one until the 80s, and that movie is kind of a very different thing.
It's like Gremlins 2, basically.
Gremlins 2. Gremlins 2.
It's a joke.
Yeah, he's literally making fun of the idea of a sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And then 3 doesn't really exist. 4 is a mindfuck of a film that gets hidden for years because of its stars. And then it's all just remakes. So
they're all kind of remakes is the great thing about this franchise.
It's
people that complain about the continuity of like Halloween with its own, choose your own adventure continuity. There is no continuity with fucking the Texas Chainsaw. There's nothing you can latch onto. It's like second one's a sequel, third one's kind of a reboot, fourth one's kind of a reboot, the fifth one's literally a remake. The sixth one is a prequel to the remake. The seventh one is a sequel to the original. The eighth one is a prequel to the original. There's a new one coming out on Netflix. That's a sequel to the original about Old Man Leatherface.
Which is why I thought, us starting to go in the direction of this series makes no sense. It's kind of a waste of our time. Of course, it makes no sense. It's a horror franchise birthed in the 80s. It's lunacy. And at some point, they started to, poochie out with Freddy a little bit, so they got lost in their own sauce. But I want to get back to Chucky, which I think was an interesting call. Mike, do you agree with that?
I mean, if we're just pulling from the 80s, then yeah.
We're not. We're not. I guess
who's your 4?
Then in that case, I would argue in terms of just if we're talking about just iconography and like things that have permeated the culture, I would honestly argue Ghostface. And I know people
That's what I've been seeing a lot lately. I've been seeing Ghostface as kind of this fourth dude, like the four wise murderers.
And I think because when you have that, you actually cover 4 very different categories too. Like Michael Myers is to me the embodiment of fear, right? He is the boogeyman, which is what they say. Mm-hmm. He's also kind of the proto slasher. But there is I
have a Michael Myers mask upstairs. I'm so upset I didn't wear it to this podcast.
And Jason
scared the shit of my kids with it. It's been great.
Freddy is the more mystical evil, and Ghostface is obviously the most human of them because Tom and I were actually just on a different podcast. I don't know if it'll come out by the time this is out, but McCaw Cinematic Universe had us on to talk about Scream 4.
Great.
And one of the things we talked about is how much Ghostface gets the shit kicked out of him in those movies. And I don't think we talk enough about how shocking that is because all of these other killers, Freddy had always been paranormal, but like Michael Myers was ostensibly mortal in the first Halloween up until we cut to the ground and he's not there.
The end, yeah.
Jason Voorhees gets more and more superpowered as it goes on. So like Tom pointed out, especially, and spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Scream 4, when you get to the end and realize there's a scene earlier in the film where Neve Campbell was essentially just beating the shit out of a teenager, you're like, oh, this rules. I don't see this. Yeah. Like, you don't get that kind of,
We need more. We need more Neve Campbell. Scream 5 needs to have more scenes of Neve Campbell drop kicking high schoolers. That's all I
agree
really
with that
need.
Completely. I think you're totally right. That was always a shock in the first Scream, and frankly, they parodied it really well in Scary Movie because that was a big part of Scary Movie too. Was the way their Ghostface got the crap beat out of him.
Yeah.
The thing about Ghostface is Ghostface. I'm not telling anything you guys don't know, but Ghostface isn't a person.
Yeah.
Ghostface is a mask. The other ones are all people or they're all constants. I like the Chucky call a lot because Chucky really is the fourth one for me.
And Chucky,
that series is so fun, so much fun,
and it's still going. Like this, it just had a TV show premiere this week. I haven't watched the first episode yet, but like, not only is it still going and Chucky's still the same, the continuity hasn't changed. They haven't rebooted or remade it, and it's still written by Don Mancini. So it's like the only franchise that's really had one consistent voice throughout. Like the first 4 Screams were directed by Wes Craven, but they didn't have Kevin Williamson on 3. He got rewritten a bit. No fucking shit. War criminal Aaron Kruger, who what the fuck did he know that Harvey Weinstein was doing what he did? Is that why he kept getting hired by this guy?
Tom,
because he did some rewrites on 4.
This is the second Aaron Kruger rant this week.
Oh, I don't. I've been ranting about him he did Arlington Road. Yeah. So when we did Arlington Road,
he's been doing it for years.
Because I mean, Aaron Kruger is like, in some. I mean, not to go off on topic, but we're gonna do this all night, so we don't fall asleep. Aaron Kruger is like the one guy I can think of who really came out of screenwriting contests. And I think he won the Nichols Fellowship with Arlington Road. It actually became a big movie with big stars, and he wound up having a massive career that persists till
it's not a terrible script, Arlington Road. Like I think there's something interesting there, but ultimately
it's not. I'm not knocking Arlington Road as much as I'm not knocking Aaron
everything
Kruger,
he's done
since. He kind of gets lucky on the spec, and then gets this job rewriting my favorite fucking horror franchise at the time, and destroys it. And then the next movie was Reindeer Game. He destroyed it.
He wrote 3 Transformers movies, He doesn't even get to come back for the 5th one.
Did he do a Ring movie? Am I making that up?
Yes. I think he did the first one.
Yeah.
And I don't like it.
I do want to...
I don't either. I don't even know why people like that movie. It's
I don't like that
unsatisfying ending of all time.
I don't like that era of greasy ghost Japanese girls that happened in the early 2000s. I think that whole era of horror fucking sucks. But, hey, we're here to talk about, our favorite 80s pedophile.
And at some point, I'll give my thoughts on
for
They
me.
Live.
I'm a big Gary Glitter person.
But I do, because I know that Kenny and Tom are interested in my thoughts on They Live at some point. But I want to just take a second here.
I really am.
To kind of calibrate us just a little bit into 1989. And so this is the 5th installment of this franchise, a franchise that started, and forgive me, it started in 80? Am I making that
84.
up? 84. So there's been a movie basically every year, give or take.
Yeah, it was 84, then 85, then they took a year off to get Dream Warriors in 87, which was the right call because some extra time to let the script simmer.
Yeah.
Seems like was a good thing. Also doesn't hurt that you get Frank Darabont and Chuck Russell, 2 of the best screenwriters horror's ever had. And then almost.
But it's not the most successful one of the franchise, which is the irony.
4 is.
4 is like far away.
Well, we're all cinema fans, and that's the thing that you always notice with box office is like the best one is not actually the one that makes the most money. The one that comes after the best one makes the most money because then everyone is back on it, and it's like, oh, Dream Warriors was so great. Let's go see the Dream Master, and then everyone packs in the theaters, and then everyone's like, they clearly didn't get Frank Darabont back. So they go 1 a year for 3 entries. They take another year off for Freddy's Dead. That year doesn't help them this time because it's terrible. See, finding out that Kenny likes Friday 6, Elm Street 6, excuse me, is like finding out my father was having an affair my entire life.
Oh, that's so sweet. That warms my heart. Here's the thing. So going into this watch, I'd seen 1, 3, 4, 5, Freddy versus Jason, and that's it. So I'd never seen 6, and I'd never run the series the way I did. These are movies that I would catch when they were on TV, and the only one I ever remember sitting down start to finish was 1. Right? I'd never seen 2, for instance. So running through the whole series, 6 is to me a bit of a breath of fresh air after 4 and 5, which I think are monotonous. I think you're living in the same color scheme. You have the same protagonist, who I think is the most boring protagonist of the series. And then I really like Lisa Zane in 6 a lot. I think she's really cool. And I have at that point, 6, I have no issues with Goofy Freddy. Right, I think it's kind of fun.
Wait, can I just say one thing real quick? Can I ask one question? Kenny, so you're saying you did not want to meet Terror's newest edition, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream
Kenny
Child?
did. He obviously wanted to meet the Dream Child.
I you guys know I had the
I hate the Dream
I'm
Child.
going to get tired and I'm going to forget how many props I bought.
So, okay.
I'm going to ride hard for this movie. It's going to be weird.
You say that about 6, feels like a breath of fresh air. Do you know who was originally going to do Elm Street 6?
Peter Jackson. I saw you tweeted today.
Yeah, he wrote.
I follow you on Twitter, and I pay close attention to your tweets because they might be about wrestling, which like one was today. By the way, did you enjoy the event? I don't get it. I don't get it until like right now.
Yes, it was really good today. Yeah, Brian
and they could be about it. Oh, you watched on YouTube too. You're a real guy. You're a real Tony Khan head over here.
Hey, let me tell you, Tom got into Comic-Con just to watch the AEW panel later this year. So, you know.
Yeah, on 4 hours of sleep of another night destroying myself. What an idiot I am.
I've run too far afoul. Yes, I follow you on Twitter. We went for Peter Jackson had written a 6, and this is after he's proven he's a master. So I hear you.
Yeah, so he was writing a script while Mike DeLuca, one of the execs at New Line, was writing a script with Rachel Talalay, giving him the story ideas. Peter Jackson's script is so good, and it's such a great idea where it's basically like a meta commentary on the series where Freddy is like a joke. He's not threatening anymore. Kids are literally like taking sleeping pills to like go to sleep.
Oh, I've read about this. Yes, it sounds amazing.
And then like he accidentally kills one of them, giving him his like he's getting his juice back. I'm like, that's amazing. Literally better than like I truly, it blows my mind that they went with literally the worst script that ever crossed their paths instead of Peter Jackson. But then again, if he made that movie, who knows if we get Lord of the Rings? So I guess
Well, so here's okay. I need to take a second here to ask sort of a more macro question of you guys because as I stated earlier, I don't really know shit about horror, but so it's kind of hard to get granular in terms of like none of these movies really connect. Freddy's the only thing that connects all these films together for all intents and purposes. He dies at the end of every one, and then they twist themselves into pretzels to bring him back at the beginning of every film.
Or they just have a dog piss on his grave and just say,
or they have a dog
whatever.
Piss fire.
Sure.
Thank you for picking that one up, Tom. I appreciate it.
So I guess my question is more about like looking at this franchise as a whole from 30,000 feet. Do you feel that it is like, because like they try to reboot it in 2010 and it doesn't work. I don't even mean that the movie doesn't work, but like it doesn't actually launch a franchise. Like it doesn't actually launch any other movies.
It doesn't really people connect. Fucking hate it. People
it made
really
money.
But it did make money.
But that's what all those remakes at the time did. This is the thing we talked about on the stream.
But they all had
Rob Zombie's 2 Halloween movies break Labor Day weekend records, but everybody fucking hates them. Friday the 13th, which I think is one of the best Friday the 13th movies, makes a shit ton of money. People fucking hate it. It then gets tied up in legal battles, even though they twice came like 2 weeks from shooting new ones. People just hated these movies, but they kept going to see them.
But this just feels so rich to me. Like watching this franchise, I was just like, how have they not found a way to bring this back in like a fun meta way?
So this is the thing me and Mike talk about all the time. Of all the franchises, this is the one with the greatest potential of all of them.
Yeah.
And when I say I generally don't like this franchise because the majority of them I don't like, but you look at 1, 3, and New Nightmare, all connected with Wes Craven, but then you have 3, the Frank Darabont, Chuck Russell connection. Dream Warriors has the best creative team of any of the franchises. It's
Helgeland and Rennie Harlan, right? That's 4.
Well, no, that's 4.
That's 4.
That's 4.
Sorry.
3 is Chuck Russell directing, and he co-writes with Darabont. But Wes Craven also wrote the script, and they rewrote him.
Right.
That's the best team any of the sequels of any of the franchises had until like Rob Zombie made his Halloween movies. Because every one of them, they get jobbers. They just get guys that are here to do a job.
Right.
Like Rennie Harlan had a good career after this, but he was never like an auteur. He was like at best a vulgar auteur. He was good at doing just blowing shit up.
Right.
Even Stephen Hopkins, he was good at blowing shit up. He found his job as
a niche. Guy. I mean, he's had quite the career.
He launched 24 basically. He directed the half of the first season. Yep. But like these franchises always get jobbers. But it's so clear in Elm Street, you don't get a jobber to do this franchise. Yeah. You need to get a real filmmaker. Yes.
I also think when you look at those remakes, and I was thinking about this and why. Whether they connected or not, there are many people who are now rediscovering the Rob Zombie Halloweens, and they're all in on them. there are a lot of people who stand by the Friday the 13th remake. And I was thinking about how Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that remake comes out, that kind of kicks off this remake boom. And people enjoyed that because I think it was, there was something about, they were actually doing something kind of exciting with that. They were doing, it's basically taking the movie that ostensibly kicked off the slasher boom even before Halloween and went, let's use all the techniques we've learned since. With Rob Zombie's Halloween, it's a very, very different interpretation of that character and interpretation of that world. And with Friday the 13th, I don't know if you guys have watched the newest Friday the 13th, but while I wouldn't say it does anything groundbreaking, the thing that version does is it takes all of the elements that we've come to identify with Jason. Like if somebody who's never seen a single Friday the 13th movie, you ask them what they know about Jason Voorhees, they ask you, oh yeah, he's guy, hockey mask, kills a bunch of kids at a summer camp, all that stuff. None of that exists in a single film. It's the weirdest shit to have to explain to people who aren't horror people. Not just, Mrs. Voorhees is the killer in the first one, but he doesn't get his mask till the third. Then by the time he becomes the lumbering beast, he's already on a boat to Manhattan and shit. Like it's too much. So that movie just goes, fine, we're giving you the Friday the 13th you're always looking for. The problem with the Nightmare on Elm Street remake is it's not doing anything. Like there's nothing within it.
I was going to...
Yeah.
I wonder if, because you mentioned the fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, right? Mm-hmm. Part of this is Michael Bay is producing these films. So Platinum Dunes does that, and he does this Nightmare thing. And he's not a great fit in the sense that, like, these movies look kind of slick in his, music video way, but like they're so self-serious. Like that Nightmare movie, which I don't hate necessarily, is really grim, and like it doesn't get the fun of the series.
Which I get what, like, I understand the impulse to go that grim with Elm Street, because when you really think about the premise, it's fucking grim. I mean, it's literally about a spectral child rapist coming back to kill kids in their dreams. Like, there's no hope. You can't sleep. Eventually, you're going to sleep, and this fucking guy's going to kill you. Right. And as much as, Michael Bay, that Platinum Dunes, Daniel Pearl shot, like, super slick look. Yeah. It actually, I think it's really good in that Elm Street remake, because this is a franchise that's all about the visuals, and there's some good visuals in that. Like when she's in the pharmacy and she's doing the micro sleeps, and it's like drifting in and out from the pharmacy to the boiler. I'm like, that's good. It doesn't help that the director on the press tour was like, yeah, I never liked Nightmare on Elm Street. They kind of kept having to badger me to make this movie, and I just gave in and said, sure, why not? Which is like, weird. Yeah, that's good to hear.
That's the weird thing with that movie, is that it doesn't have the others of those remakes you can at least look at and say, okay, whether it works or not, I understand that when they decided we're remaking Friday the 13th, or we're remaking Halloween, we found somebody who came in with a pitch of here's how to do it different. And I remember we were in college when it came out. Tom and I and a group of us, a friend of ours, Carrie, who you guys know, or Phil, this, but we all went. And I remember sitting there and for the first like 15, 20 minutes being really excited, because it felt like maybe they were about to do something interesting. And then do you guys get that feeling when you watch a movie where you think you know where it's going and your brain's going like, oh God, they're going to do this. And then when the movie doesn't do it, you go, oh, well, the thing I thought would be so much more interesting.
Yeah, we do that all the time.
That was my biggest problem.
It's the way we watch movies.
At least for me, when I watched, because the thing with the Elm Street remake is they kind of toe the line a little bit for a while in that of like, did Freddy actually do anything? Like there's a little hint of that where it's like,
correct.
Was he? And I remember sitting there and thinking, what a smart way to revamp.
But then they just throw it away.
That's the problem. I thought, what a smart way to revamp this franchise is to make it Freddy is seeking revenge on these kids because he was basically killed by a righteous mob over nothing.
Yep. I thought that too. Honestly, I thought that too as it was playing out. I was like, this is interesting. But
it would have been a great metatextual thing of like Wes Craven couldn't say he's a child rapist in '84 because of all the rash of those phony daycare scandals where it ended up the kids weren't getting molested.
Yeah, the satanic panic shit and all that.
So it would have been this interesting metatextual thing of making it that Freddy was actually a victim of that, giving him a sort of almost he's kind of righteous in his quest for vengeance, but also like, no, he's still a dream killer killing children. Give you that interesting moral push-pull that you didn't really get in the series until they could have at that point. But
so it feels like we're all perhaps in agreement that the best film in this franchise is the first one. That the second best is probably the third one.
Well, I think they're 1, 2, 3, and New Nightmare are all top incredible films. Yeah. But I mean, New Nightmare, I'm surprised you don't like it more, Phil, because it's adaptation of the horror movie. It's so good and for us. So like that's
it wasn't that I didn't like it,
but I think you clearly liked it. I'm not saying you didn't. I liked it.
It's
an obvious number 2 to me.
I think for me is that it's so fucking strong for like the first 2 acts. Like it's just like sort of like shocking.
And then Aaron Kruger does a rewrite,
and then Aaron Kruger kind of gives you your third act, and it just feels a little like
there's all. Right,
so
hang on, okay.
Yeah, no, Mike, you go.
Sorry, no, I was just gonna bring up my one problem. My one problem with New Nightmare that you and I have been talking about for over a decade, which is my biggest hang up with New Nightmare, is I will fully believe that the manifestation of evil actually comes out through horror films and can possess our real world. I will buy that. You are asking me to buy that every person in Hollywood recognizes Heather Langenkamp by name? I'm just saying, if you want me to buy into it, when she goes to the hospital,
that's the Hollywood I want to live in.
But I'm saying, when
things
she goes
are
to the hospital,
so different. You're wrong. She was in Just the 10 of Us.
No, Kenny,
everybody wants that show.
That is my point, is that more realistically, instead of somebody going, oh, you're Heather Langenkamp, they should go, you did that show. What was it, 8 is Enough?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't 8 is Enough. What was it? It was the show. You were in that show, right? That should be it. It should be 5 minutes.
No, the best fantasy element of that is that Wes Craven lives in that palatial mansion.
Well, that's the one bummer.
Which he even says in the Never Sleep Again. He's like, in the original script, I was constantly running from Freddy. So Michael Berryman from Hills Have Eyes was driving me around in a van. I'd cut my eyelids off so I could just keep writing the script. Then I thought, it would just be easier if I lived in a mansion.
That would have been so great if he was in the van.
So
I really do love that. I love Wes Craven as Everyman. There's something so kind of like charming about that to me.
He's a good actor, by the way. Like I was impressed. He actually was good.
Well, because Wes Craven's just, he's such an interesting presence and personality. It's like he says this. He would say this in interviews all the time. People would always come up to me assuming I'm this like long-haired, sleazy, like I make horror movies kind of guy. Yeah. And then
John
it's like,
Carpenter.
oh no, not even John Carpenter. More like the guy who directed Friday Part 5. The guy who was like directing pornos before he made it.
Even though Wes Craven was also directing pornos before he made those films.
But like people would meet Wes Craven and it's like, oh no, he's just this like he's just this Ralph Lauren dressing like college professor, this soft spoken just old gentleman who should be like
we've covered Music of the Heart, so we know
that's who we wanted to be.
That's who we wanted to be. So
but no, because you said the third act of New Nightmare is kind of where it falls apart for you.
Yeah.
Every third act in the Elm Street franchise is bad.
Yeah,
They never know how to wrap. They don't know how to wrap these movies up because you have a villain.
There's one that's kind of good.
Which one?
2.
Oh, no. Fuck off.
When she kisses Freddy, it's incredible.
All right, well, let's talk about Freddy vs. Jason. I'll say has the best ending because that's the one where he knows exactly where it has to go.
Wait. Freddy versus Jason is interesting because I want to get back to something. Not to, this is going to be a 3-hour pod.
Okay.
Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm sorry, Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre are eminently remakeable because those guys don't talk. Yeah. And that's not a small detail. Like, no, we just don't know that much about those guys, except basically they're various forms of maniac and they're basically unkillable, right? Yes. Whereas Freddy is hilarious and we know so much about him. And Chucky, by the way, Chucky is also hilarious and we know so much about him. But those two franchises had to go into kind of horror and almost satire. I'm sorry, comedy and almost satire pretty early on. So when you keep saying that Freddy, we don't have the fun of the series, like you have to remake it with the fun of the series, I think that would take a lot of fucking guts for a filmmaker to come out and in this day and age to say, I'm remaking Nightmare, but for people who actually have seen the fucking movies.
Well, no, I don't mean it like, I meant more.
I'm not knocking you. I'm not knocking you. No,
I know you're right. Yeah.
I think you're right because they keep remaking Chucky and they keep understanding that character is inherently funny, right? They keep understanding that only works as a comedy. But what they don't seem to understand is the Freddy of Nightmare 1, A, was hilarious, but B, like, is long gone. Like, he's now a guy who has an MTV special.
Well, I think there's also...
I do want to say that I guess what I was getting at more than anything is that watching the remake, the 2010 thing that they tried to do, there's nothing there that is launching a franchise. Like that to me, like is what was so baffling about it. Like, I get it. You hired Jackie Earle Haley, but like, he's not gonna, I mean, that's just not a guy you're going to want to follow through 5 or 6 movies. As much as I love Jackie Earle Haley. And then I look at like the various players in it. It's just a very limp attempt to reboot a franchise.
I want to ask something else.
Okay.
Phil, having not seen Freddy versus Jason, what do you think happens? What do you think I think they
fight a lot.
Okay.
You would think.
What do you get? You guys get what I'm getting at, right?
Yes.
What's the not sexual. What's the orientation of these characters? How are we feeling about these two characters?
Like, where are they?
No. How do we feel about them? Who are our rooting interests?
Yeah. Who do you think's fallen? Who do you think's the heel? Who do you think's the baby face?
Yes.
I think
who's good and who's bad.
Oh boy. I think that Jason's the heel. Again, knowing nothing about this, all I know about this movie, Freddy vs. Jason, that is that they were trying to do it for a very long time, and that eventually they did it, and horror fans didn't like it because of all the various sort of like false starts and thought what it could have been, and that it didn't, pay off in the way that they wanted it to. All I know is that they fight in some sort does he drag him to hell or something like that? Or does it start in hell? Or because I know that Jason goes to hell.
Jason, both of our 2 fine gentlemen are in hell at the beginning of the movie.
Okay.
Now
they're fighting in hell.
Now, Phil, what do you think?
Well, no, they're not fighting in hell.
Jason X. Let's just try and get.
They go to
guess
space.
Every Jason.
I know he goes to space. Just keep and I know that Cronenberg is in space with him.
They go to space.
He's not in space with him.
He's not in space.
Before the space trip.
See, they go to space, and despite the fact that there's no gravity in space, the bodies do indeed hit the floor.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the song.
I mean, I guess what I'm sort of getting at here, and it's something that Kenny and I were texting about a little bit too, which is that New Nightmare.
Well, I want to just tell you the answer.
Okay, please.
Jason's the good guy. Jason's just your sweet little boy.
Big old doofus boy. My large adult son, Jason Voorhees.
Yes, he's just a sweet old boy. Yes, he's just a sweet old dummy.
Do you want to know how this the movie kicks off, and how this is how one's the good and one's bad? Freddy knows he doesn't have power if kids don't know about his name, so he resurrects Jason to kill kids in Springwood. His people are going to blame him for it. And so Freddy gets his powers back, but the kids decide, like the first one, we're going to drag Jason, we're going to drag Freddy out of the dreams, bring him to the Camp Crystal Lake, and the two boys are going to fight. And Jason's just like, I'm just here. Somebody's in my way. I'm going to slice him and dice him, but I just want to go back.
That's a sweaty premise. Like
it's actually not it's not if you watch it. It's actually pretty simply streamlined based on like these characters' histories. And I read there's a whole book detailing every script that was written before getting to this one. You want to talk about sweaty? There's one where it's set in the quote unquote real world where the killer who Jason Voorhees is based on is on trial, and Freddy Krueger's exists, and his cult of Fred heads are trying to capture and kill Jason. And
okay. Can I also can we all agree that like someone versus someone is never a good idea? Like it never works. I don't want to see Batman versus Superman. I don't want to see Alien versus Predator. I don't want to see these things fighting.
Excuse me, Godzilla versus Kong, my two large
that
animals
actually did work. You're right.
That
worked. That worked. I stand corrected. You that's true.
I'll say it. I think Freddy vs. Jason, for what it is probably the platonic ideal of what you like. Sure. It's better than Alien vs. Predator.
I pitched to Clay Keller that Phil, me and you do a versus draft, but I don't think we got it. Someone else called it.
Whatever.
But yeah, Kramer versus Kramer, I guess would be the 7 on
Kramer's
that.
Number
that
one
was Mike's joke.
Though.
That was Mike's joke.
That was I had that bit at the start, but no one
talked over it.
Fine.
So
yeah,
okay, I want to just
also Kramer versus Kramer sucks. Sorry.
Yes,
anyway,
it does not suck. That's why I said it's 7.
It doesn't suck. I like it.
I think Kramer versus Kramer is a movie that you watch now and go, oh, this dude hates women. This is weird.
Okay, so
anyway,
back to Freddy.
I have a different take on it.
I love.
Do we really want to go down the Kramer
which
versus
is more,
Kramer
which is more of a, which is my take on Kramer versus Kramer is more of an indictment of Hollywood at large than an indictment of the movie, which I think is perfectly fine. But the indictment, the Hollywood, the indictment of Hollywood at large is like, of course. The movie, the divorce movie that wins Best Picture is the one where the woman is the evil monster and the man is the wonderful parent.
Well, listen, like, bitches be crazy.
That's more
bitches
of a,
be.
Okay,
it's just a fact.
I think that's more. I'm not.
I want to.
I think it's more of a symptom of the time that it came out.
Hollywood is shit.
Sure.
But I also don't think that. But.
Good flick.
Here's what I want to say.
Good 7 on the verses.
Here's what I want to say to not cause any problems. And I also understand that we're getting pretty deep into it. So I want to say one thing that hopefully makes this more bearable for your listeners. You guys have to understand, listeners, all of you who have paid for this. We don't hang out. Like me and Tom hang out, Phil and Kenny hang out, but we're on opposite coasts. We never hang out outside of podcasts. So unfortunately. This has just become a night out with the boys on mic, ostensibly.
Well, I'm doing the best I can to try to keep this thing on something close to
and everybody
rails.
appreciates that. So keep going.
It is 45 minutes in, and we have not talked about the Dream Child. So I want to try for a second to talk about the Dream Child.
Of course.
The synopsis of The Dream Child is, this is the 5th installment of the popular franchise, focuses on Alice, a survivor of the 4th film who believes that Freddy Krueger has been eliminated for good. She optimistically hopes to start a life with fellow survivor Dan. The nightmares begin soon, though, and Alice learns she's pregnant. When her friends start dying, Alice suspects that Freddy is using the fetus within her as a weapon. She can fight the demon. Can she fight the demon while protecting her unborn child? Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child opened on August 11th, 1989 in 3rd place behind Parenthood and The Abyss. It would go on to make $22 million on an $8 million budget. It's got 29% on Rotten Tomatoes, 31% from audiences. I'm going to read a couple brief snippets of some reviews. The New York Times wrote that the film doesn't pretend to be anything more than it is, a genre film that won't totally insult your intelligence or your eyes. Variety called it a poorly constructed special effects showcase with highly variable acting, but praised the special effects. Chicago Tribune praised the direction of Stephen Hopkins, saying, using a style heavily indebted to music videos, lots of fast-cutting odd angles and gratuitous camera movements, Hopkins keeps the energy up, though his manner is a bit too choppy to keep all the diverse elements together. So here's the reason that I liked this movie is because I feel like it's really close to being a Tim Burton movie. it's just really kind of, I appreciated the set design. I liked all of the creature effects. I think that the Dream Child himself is great. I liked that there was like kind of a second monster sort of for a second there, and that sort of the duality of that I enjoyed. I loved all the stop motion shit. Like, I just feel like it really, it's tangible. It looks fucking great. Like, that stuff worked for me. So I understand that maybe it's not a great story, but
there's also, it's funny you say that, because I was thinking about this as I was watching it. You mentioned how you liked it because it was almost a Tim Burton movie.
Yes.
And I just want to say that it struck me that between this movie, Predator 2, Blown Away, a movie I always confuse with Arlington Road, but Blown Away, and most especially Judgment Night, Stephen Hopkins' filmography is full of movies that I go, this is almost what it needs to be. Like, and I mean, no disrespect, but every single, like Judgment Night especially, shout out to our mutual
Kenny's
listener,
a big
Jackson
Judgment
Bourne.
Night fan, right?
I love Judgment Night, but I agree with you.
I should love
that Judgment Night could have been a like modern Peckinpah.
It's a weird thing because you watch Judgment Night, like great cast. This is a good premise. It's got a good soundtrack. It's shot pretty well. Why isn't this working? Like what's missing here? And Dream Child to me is another one where it's like, I think it's a smart idea. It's a new idea as opposed to like 4, which is just Dream Warriors Light. I like some of the elements of this. I like some of the kills in this. I like all this. Why isn't it over that head? There's like a little, it's a thing you can't get over.
Well, okay. I can't even totally blame Stephen Hopkins for this one, because the little details you get in Never Sleep Again, such as he was hired on Valentine's Day 1989. The movie came out August 1989. Yeah. He had
Is that not enough time to make a movie?
Never made one. Don't know.
I'd have to double check. I'd have to double check my filmmaker's handbook. But so he had.
It's a miracle the movie's any good. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. So it looks great. All that technical stuff is truly, really amazing. The script is just absolute garbage. I mean, it literally just lurches from scene to scene. There's like no tension or drama at all. Freddy's fully devolved into a Catskills comedian at this point, but it's so
It's
lazy.
A boy! Bon appetit!
Bitch!
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, he's so good.
The worst is the worst is the motorcycle scene.
I love the motorcycle scene. How do you hate that?
Technically, it looks great, but his quips
Fuel
are just
injection.
He's literally just yelling car terms. And just, fuel injection.
Overdrive.
Bitch.
So in fairness,
turn signal, bitch.
So in fairness, chew with your mouth.
Phil and Freddie's bromance is pretty wonderful.
I didn't really fucking think it.
I know you love him. You fell for him. Which
oh my god,
he's a funny guy.
I have to know.
And Chick loves funny guys.
I have to know one thing, which is Phil. I did think of you during one episode of Freddy's Nightmares so much. I needed to bring it up to you. It's the finale of season 1, because you always talk about how you don't like horror movies, and I didn't know how you'd feel about Freddy. And the premise of the season finale of season 1 is it is about a teenage boy who's like, he kind of dresses in black and he's a bit like, introverted, but he's got a crush on the hot Winona Ryder-esque goth rocker girl in school. Yeah. But she's obsessed with Freddy Krueger and serial killers. And he's simultaneously like, I want to hang out with her, but also this shit creeps me out.
Right.
And then, of course, Freddy, who has taken this girl on as his paramour,
that's Phil.
Comes after him. And he's terrified because Freddy is stalking him for stealing his girl. And I just watched that, and I truly thought, like, this is Phil's nightmare in high school in a way.
You know him so well.
It's just like...
It's weird.
Yeah, no, that's definitely... Phil,
I have a question for you, Phil.
It'd be triggering
having watched
to watch
this whole
that.
series.
Yeah.
You're a self-reputed wimp when it comes to horror movies. You ran through this series like it was nothing. Yeah. Were you ever scared?
I think that the most upsetting portion of the franchise for me was in the third one when the kids' tendons are used like marionettes.
Mm-hmm. Never forget that one. That's the best.
It definitely stayed with, like, that was where I was just like, okay, this is genuinely upsetting. And then it's great. It's really well done, but it's very upsetting.
As a writer for TV, did you get viscerally upset when Freddy turned into a TV, picked up a girl and said, "Welcome to prime time, bitch," and then just slammed her into the TV?
No, I applauded, obviously.
Is that what happens when you get greenlit for a show? Is that what they say to you?
That's what they say. Yeah, green light, bitch.
Up. And they just went, "Look,
welcome to CBS All Access, bitch."
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the reason that I enjoyed this series and was hoping this was going to be the one to win ultimately was because I knew it was the most dialed up. I knew it was the most sort of fantasy oriented, which is more my speed. And when it's just a straight, like, I don't mean straight, but like Jason and Michael Myers, that is, feel more.
Friends call him Mike. It's okay.
Call him Mike. I find them more upsetting because it's so grounded, quote unquote. And this, I knew I could kind of. Well, I know that it isn't obviously Mike, but
I
at
was
the same time,
say the interesting thing is you're absolutely right. If you were going to plow through a single franchise, this is the one for you. However, of the ones that you get in '89, if you're talking like goofy and absurd,
it's when
Greenchild is the least of them now, because obviously the one from
when he goes to New York. When
Jason
Mike Myers
takes Manhattan. No, Jason goes to New York.
I'm sorry.
Jason
I was thinking
Manhattan.
because I was thinking fives versus fives for some reason. Yes, you guys are right. Continue.
Jason Takes Manhattan, which is we covered it on our show.
Yes,
because we thought it'd be really funny if on April 1st we released an episode of a movie that would never make it in the registry. We thought people would find that fun. Not a popular episode. People did not care for that. Didn't go over well.
Well, it does feel like you really took a sharp left turn, and people were probably a little bit, unsure what to make of that.
Who the fuck knows what these people want? Our most popular episode of all time is an old episode of you talking about Babe 2. Who the fuck knows what they want? I don't know.
By the way, I mean,
what do you guys want?
But I mean, Kenny and I feel the same way. Episodes that just like off the charts huge have no correlation to a movie or a guest.
Speaking of Mike Myers, right, Phil?
Yes. Despite Shagney is still one of our highest rated episodes. Really? No guest, and it's just Kenny and I sort of coming around to liking the movie by the end of it. Weirdly.
Good picture.
But yeah, it's just goes to show there's no rhyme or reason. But I do want to. So Tom, you talked a little bit about the development of this movie, and I guess apparently they approached Stephen King and Frank Miller at one point to write and direct.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that just might be rumor scuttlebutt. Sure. Stephen Hopkins was like a pretty quick pickup for them because he was young and new. He was like a storyboard visual guy.
And he gets Predator 2 right after this. Like basically they handed Predator 2.
Yeah, so the screenplay was the really difficult part because they were going through all the splatterpunk writers of the time, and they went to David Scow. They said no to his idea. They went to two other guys, splatterpunk guys.
What was? Do you know what Scow's idea was? I'm sorry, I don't mean to take us off track, but I'm interested.
I don't remember exactly. It's very quick in the documentary, but it was just mainly not anything that we see in the movie. But they get two other splatterpunk guys. They get their script. They can only really write it quickly. They bring David Scow back to do dialogue polish. That's about it. And then they're kind of writing it as they go because they just have to fucking work so quickly. Like to the point where they basically had the studio and they built like all the sets basically like on top of each other. So they were like, there were times we were shooting scenes and we'd have to yell at the construction guys to stop fucking putting the set together because we literally have shooting this scene while you guys are building like the Escher stairs from the end, like literally next door to us. Stephen Hopkins even says he looks at it now and he's like, if somebody gave me that schedule today, I would just say, no, I literally, it's impossible to do that. I don't know how he did it in 89.
I get that. I have a question for you guys that's a little bit on a tangent, but not really. But I'm curious as to
on this episode.
Yeah, I know, right? What director who has not directed a horror film before would you want to see direct a horror film?
Oh, more specific. Ooh. Who should reboot this franchise?
Well, that's Kenny's question too. But the director that comes to mind for me, having watched this film, was Terry Gilliam. Like, I'd love Terry Gilliam to just go like full on horror and see what he would do with it. I think it would be interesting. Because like the Asylum stuff in this made me think about some of his Asylum stuff that he's done with 12 Monkeys and with Fisher King a little bit and what have you. But is there a director that jumps out at you that A, to Kenny's question, should reboot this series, or B, that you would like to see do a horror film?
Well, first off, I want to point out, who knows if Terry Gilliam has made a horror film? I feel like he's made like movies in the last 5 years that we don't know exist.
It's true.
Yeah, Mr. Megorium might be a horror movie.
It might be.
Like, I was going through my mind.
I think it was Dr. Parnassus. Mr. Megorium.
Dr. Parnassus.
Different guy.
Dr. Parnassus Wonder Emporium is the Natalie Portman, Dustin Hoffman.
Sorry, Dr. Parnassus.
Yeah, for all we know, the zero theorem is like fucking
I was
Salo.
about to pull zero theorem. I was about to pull zero theorem. Yeah.
Gilliam.
I'll give you one, Phil. I'll give you
please.
one. Yeah. Who definitely had the scariest movie of '99.
Oh yeah.
Julie Taymor.
Ooh,
wait,
for
sure.
Oh no, you know we should do it. Speaking of '99, the fucking Wachowskis.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
My Taymor thing was what I want out of horror is something that you rarely get today, because I don't really like most modern horror movies. Except I like the Rob Zombie stuff, because I want to just be fucking floored by what I'm seeing. I want to be genuinely scared, and I want to actually feel like the people who are being wronged and being killed are real people and aren't just there to be murdered. They're not real people. And I think in like the 80s, and not in this franchise, because this franchise is hardly a horror franchise, but in Nightmare, in Friday the 13th, which is like my seminal horror franchise, and in Halloween, I always felt both of those things. I always felt scared. It always felt visceral, and I always felt like the people who were getting killed, despite how poor the acting was usually, were real people and real kids. The way I felt at the end of Titus was that same feeling. It was what the fuck is happening? So I think that she can find it. So I agree
100%. That's a great answer. I'd love to see her reboot Nightmare.
Well, I think
Titus is also very tactile, and I like that about it too. But all right,
so I'm going to pull one out of left field. I'm going to say something that maybe folks won't like, but I'll say it. He's only made like 2 films thus far, but I want it badly. I'm going to say Andy Serkis, and my reasoning for this being,
I'm seeing his second film tomorrow.
So here's my thing with it, and I've said this to Tom.
Are you going to see Venom 2 tomorrow, Kenny?
With Rollins, because all this fucking kid wants to do, this beautiful, wonderful child wants to do, is watch Squid Game, and it's like where we're drawing the line. And Rollins and I have been in a war for the last 2 weeks about this. It's the first time I'm like, Rollins, you want to go watch Survivor? Because we watched Survivor together. This kid, he's my best friend, and he goes, no, I'm not talking to you. So the best I could do is he's wanted to see fucking Carnage. And I'm like, all right, I'll take you to see Carnage tomorrow. And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Probably won't like you after it. I'm like, all right, great. So let's see what Serkis has to offer.
Here's my thing. Here's my thought.
I'm sorry, just give me 1 second, Tom. Please, just on this. I don't think he'd like Squid Game, Kenny.
He's watched, dude. The internet right now is a mess. Like, he's watched 15-minute recaps of every episode on YouTube. He knows everything that happens. I should just let him watch it because now we've done the parent thing.
Hey, you've got to stick to your ground. You can't fucking.
We drew the line in the sand, and Laura's very much on the. We should not let him watch this. Half his friends are watching it.
That's crazy. Just show him the Running Man. It's fine.
Kids, but anyway.
Oh, you'd love that.
Just show him the Running Man and be like, pretend it's in Korean. It sounds like the same shit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You
like
Professor
Tanaka?
To all our Squid Game fans out there, it's not the same thing.
Show him Show him the Running Man, and then give him Karl Marx's Das Kapital, and be like, "There, put them together. You're fucking."
I keep trying to substitute
a real savage burn from the guy who hasn't watched.
What a savage burn!
I have not.
I keep trying to substitute in Hunger Games for it, and somehow he's got it in his head that Hunger Games is a ripoff of Squid Game. He's like, that's just like a ripoff version. I'm like, dude,
that's not how this works.
I'll show you Battle Royale.
Yeah, show him Battle Royale.
I think your son is Dr. Manhattan, and he doesn't realize time is not a circle.
That's right.
Okay,
yeah.
so Mike, Serkis. You said Andy Serkis. That's who you want to reboot the series, or just make
here's my reasoning for both. Because my thing is, and I've talked about this with Tom, the problem with modern horror to me, is that we've lost what we once had. If you look at 80s in horror, right, and people talk about the 80s is a great time for horror. You had two different things going on. You had the really highbrow shit, right? You had the thing that were, some of the more highbrow, high-minded Carpenter stuff. As much as we talk about him as a genre guy, you're not packing in audiences to see Prince of Darkness. But you also have shit like Possession. You have the strain of horror that is leading to Silence of the Lambs winning Best Picture.
Yeah, fancy boy horror. That kind of started in the 60s and 70s, yeah.
Yeah, but you've got your highbrow. You've also got your lowbrow shit. You've got your cheap thrill slashers. Now, Elm Street can be a little more high-minded than that, but you still got those slashers that you go for and you go to see when you want that visceral thrill. I mean, I think about the fact that, and Tom and I know this, we're probably this weekend going to see Halloween Kills with my mother, who normally doesn't like horror, but when Halloween came out, she went to see it in the theater and loved it and really vibed with it. But because you just wanted to go see that. What bugs me about horror today is that all of it, other than your straight to 10, all of it is that A24 thing that kind of occupies the middle ground. Because my frustration with elevated horror, and I some of
the Ari Aster stuff is what you're saying.
Oh, I can't get into Ari Aster. Who cares? But the point is, great, you made Wicker Man. I love it. Okay, point is, no, it's wonderful. I love to watch a movie that I understand fully, and then it spends 10 minutes at the end telling me anyway.
See, what about Robert Eggers?
Robert Eggers rules.
I like Robert Eggers. But my thing is, even so, my problem with elevated horror is my same thing with modern sci-fi, which is it's not highbrow or lowbrow. It is this middle ground that tells its audience it's very smart for getting rudimentary things that it's spoon feeding them. Right. Now, what I miss and what I want and what I fear in a way is I think about watching Scream again for this other podcast was so refreshing. And I rewatched Saw recently, and it's fun because I remember that was a thing like Elm Street. When you watch these Elm Street movies and then you see Freddy on it, right? Teenagers could go to the movies and just go, let's go see a slasher movie.
Can I ask you a question, though? Because I do feel like Blumhouse is existing in some sort of alternate A24 universe. Am I crazy in that?
They are the flip side. They're the flip side.
They're the closest, but I also think and they do that to some degree, but even then, I mean, they have, so there's some things where the Purge movies sort of occupy that realm to some degree. Right. And I think the fact that there was a second escape room is a little encouraging because it's just there's a dumb thing I can go to the movies to see.
What about The Invisible Man?
Well, I mean, yes, but The Invisible Man is a different kind of animal in a way. I mean, that's one of those many legacy reboots of the Universal monsters. I think what I worry about sometimes is I just want there to be a place for what used to exist, which was this, we're going to crank out these, we've got these franchises, we'll do these things. I feel like that's missing. Now, the reason I said Andy Serkis, which is where this all started, is that when you look at Andy Serkis and you look at what he's doing, especially with Venom 2, which is a 90-minute movie, name the last 90-minute comic movie. It is a movie that is...
Don't worry, Kennedy. You're going to get a half-hour trailer, so it'll get to 2 hours.
Hey, I need it to be 90 minutes. I got to pick up my daughter at a birthday party.
So it's a movie that knows what it wants to be. It knows the audience went to see this first one because it was dumb fun. It's giving me dumb fun. The thing I find refreshing about Andy Serkis is I think he could actually, if he sticks to this, wind up doing what people liked Peter Jackson for before Lord of the Rings, which is the stuff like Dead Alive, which is the stuff like Bad Taste, which is I'm going to get you in, I'm going to get you out, I'm going to give you some fun. It's the thing that we still like Sam Raimi for, because even his Spider-Man movies have the Evil Dead energy.
Well, I think the success of Venom 2 should, in theory, give him a bit of a blank check on the next one.
But that's the question. Does he use that blank check to make
something he doesn't need a blank check for? That's where I keep going towards, which is Blumhouse, A24, they're part of the system. And when you're part of the system, you don't need to take wild risks. Now, the risk they're taking is we're going to try to prove to you, maybe not Blumhouse as much, but A24, we're going to try to prove to you that a horror movie can win Best Picture. Mm-hmm. That seems to be what they're trying to accomplish with some of this elevated horror. Blumhouse is, we're going to prove to you that we can make $100 million with everything. Which is, fine and whatever. That's their business model, but it does kind of lead to a flattening of this whole genre. What we don't have, and I don't really know how we're going to get it, is the fucking gum and popsicle sticks approach. And that's what, we mentioned that Friday the 13th Part 5 was directed by a porn director. Correct. That was that whole energy for that whole series was pull them. They literally had they had a stage dedicated to just pumping out Friday the 13th movies, and they just kept making them and took whoever was around there. And it was all just so, this is my basic theory in general, probably why I'm not a huge success, is it's so much more important to make the decision. And it doesn't really matter if the decision is good or bad. Make the decision, move on. Make the decision, move on. And that's what I love about the Friday the 13th franchise is it's make the decision, move on. Make the decision, move on. And just it feels so propulsive, Sure. And you're just not going to get that anymore. Everyone's way too contemplative. Everyone's seen, random. I mean, it's not random, but people like Ari Aster, people like Jordan Peele, or all these people seemingly kind of, come out of nowhere and make these, really lauded films. And you have the equipment now. You have the access to good actors. You have access to crews. You have access to even sets and stages. Yeah. You have access to CG. It's not that hard to do that really, stuff that looks great. And that's frankly not what I want out of horror. Like the stuff that like my kids want to watch. Think that like The Conjuring, I'd rather
Activity
blow my brains out.
I do feel like
they did.
I do think that the horror
that was like 15 years ago, though, dude.
No, for sure. But I as someone who doesn't know horror, I'm just sort of looking at this from the outside. But I
love those movies, and I love The Purge, and I love the Purge franchise. But
I just think that the horror genre, from a studio perspective, is still incredibly lucrative. It's the type of thing where, even on the top end, you're not spending more than $30 million on this movie. So you're probably going to be okay. You still have, Malignant. You still have the Conjuring series. You still have, there's no shortage of different sort of, and Kenny just mentioned the Jordan Peele stuff. It's a pretty fertile genre.
This era is probably the best era for horror since the 80s, because the 90s were dire. Right. You had some high points with Candyman and Scream and whatnot, but it was ultimately pretty fucking dire, the 90s.
Well, Kenny and I, for 99, we've talked, there's basically no horror films in 99.
It was a nightmare.
I mean, it's horrible. I mean, and then the 2000s don't start great. And even though I like a bunch of the remakes, that era is not the best era for horror. Not a lot of original
Saw
stuff.
hits and Paranormal Activity hits.
Saw hits. Rob Zombie, makes his big hit with The Devil's Rejects, but then he gets sucked into the remake craze, even though he makes him very much his own. But that it really wasn't until the early 2010s or whatever. I can't really say which exact movie did it, but It's been a great decade. Where you could get a lot of the highbrow stuff. You get The Witch. But then you get some really good down and dirty, grimy shit like the Purge movies, or there's a lot of great indie stuff. The Evil Dead remake was fucking great. One of the most viscerally nasty movies I've seen in a movie.
Or like there was the You're Next, and
You're Next,
and Happy Death Day, and there is a lot of fun to be had in this vein.
Yeah.
But you're just never gonna get the.
Well, there's
the run and gun, but
because movies studios, they drag everything out now because they know what they have and they know that there's always the potential for a franchise, so we gotta properly manage it. I mean, the last time we saw that kind of run and gun that Friday the 13th had was the Saw movies. They cranked out 7 in 7 years, and then they ran that into the ground.
I have a question though, because looking at the enormous success of the 2 last Halloween films that David Gordon Green did with Danny McBride, you have to assume that someone's looking at Nightmare on Elm Street, someone's looking at Friday the 13th, right? They've got to be kind of looking at that saying...
Friday the 13th is locked up in a legal battle, so they literally can't do anything. Nightmare on Elm Street, I don't know what's going on. There has to be something... there must be a legal thing going on that we don't know about, because it's been 11 years. I know people kind of, shit their pants over the remake or whatever, but it's like, it's been 11 years. Yeah. The Halloween really has restored what people think about 100%. Slasher movies. Yeah. I mean, slasher movies are kind of seeing a nice little resurgence now. We had the Fear Street trilogy over the summer. That was really good, actually.
But do you think that one of the keys to the success of these Halloween films is Jamie Lee Curtis, though? The thing about the Nightmare on Elm Streets is that you don't have a Nancy of the same caliber as Laurie.
I have an idea to bring Nancy back, though. So, Hollywood, call me, shitheads.
I think the bigger thing, though...
Yeah.
I mean, there's 2 things. One, I wonder if it could survive in terms of, the Jamie Lee Curtis element, I think, it brought a lot of people in who, number 1, wouldn't have gone otherwise, and number 2, do not care about reviews. Now, that first one is well received.
Sure.
The second one has been getting a lot of flack from people for reasons that feel kind of weird.
Still going to make $50 million.
Oh, yeah, but that's why. Because the people who are going to go see it are the people, if my mom's going to go see it, she's not going to turn around and go, I don't know, Bill Gabiri said that he didn't like this part of the movie. No one's going to, that's not how it's going to fucking work. And I think that's a good thing, because I think the problem, too, I'll be honest, we can't get into it too much, but a new Candyman came out this year. Do I think it was hampered by some studio shit? I think that's obvious when you watch it. But I found it really interesting. But it was also a movie that, because it had the pressure of the original and also people not understanding the original, it kind of got discoursed to death before it hit the screens from a mix of people who were mad that it added social issues, which were always in the Candyman franchise, and other people who were saying, well, it was too on the nose or shit like that. That I do wonder with Elm Street especially, because Elm Street you read interviews with Robert Englund, and everybody asks him, how the fuck was it possible that you played a child murderer that was then on packs of gum for kids and had a novelty record with the Fat Boys?
That was,
and he kind of just shrugs. Yeah, and he's doing shrugs, and he's just like, I don't know. And I think to try and do the fact that Elm Street was so successful with such an insane base to start from, I wonder, I think you would have to do a lot of navigating for that to bring it back now and survive all of the trenches that it would have to dive through before it ever even hits the screen.
That's a problem.
People get so fucking twisted about movies nowadays and morality and stuff, where it's horror needs to get to dark places. And if you guys don't want your horror to hit a dark place, I agree. You make another Elm Street movie in today's environment, man, people are going to lose their minds about oh, you're making a movie about a child molester? Is that the kind of thing we need to put into the world right now? I mean, you look at some of these reviews for Halloween Kills, and it's oh, well, it's just so nihilistic. Michael just kills people that he just random people. It's so mean. I'm yeah, that's Michael Myers. That's what he does.
Or it's
he
also like
people.
I liked Candyman. I liked Candyman a lot, but you saw reviews that, I mean, it was like you guys remember the episode, I think it's the Poochie episode of The Simpsons where the guy's doing the focus group and he's talking to the kids and he goes, so you want something that reflects your daily life and is grounded, but also has high-flying fantasy? Because you saw people talking about Candyman and going like, I feel like it didn't properly tackle the issues of today. And also I wanted it to distract me from the issues of today, which is a tough balance to strike.
That's yeah. I mean, you're getting into what I think Phil and I are getting very close to terming the Ted Lasso Squid Game problem, which is
although we are pitching our own version of Ted Lasso meets Squid Game.
We are. Actually, come to think of it, yeah,
kind of.
But which is 3 weeks ago or a month ago. All we were hearing from development executives and producers was everyone wants their Ted Lasso.
Yep.
Today, all you're hearing is everyone wants their Squid Game, which, you know, all anyone should take from that is no one knows anything, everybody's stupid, and all you can do is really good work, right?
Yes.
The best you can do is really good work. And what Ted Lasso and Squid Game have in common is they're both really good work, right? So I think the Candyman thing is a really interesting kind of encapsulation of what's gone on, because Candyman, the original, is explicitly about race without having a fucking puppet sequence telling you about how it's about race. But it's explicitly about race, and it's explicitly about white supremacy and about oppression, and it couldn't be more obvious. But I think the issue it would have in 2021 is, and frankly, this is how I feel in general, is we're all too either stupid or more likely argumentative, that we just are here to find things that are wrong with it, and we just to start a fight. Because I understand why modern day Candyman felt like it had to hold your hand a little bit, because they never wanted to be accused of ignoring it. But it's impossible to ignore it with that premise and that villain.
Well, and you know what? I want to say, you saying that reminds me, there's one other thing that Ted Lasso and Squid Game have in common, and it's a reason why Elm Street would have a problem. No, there's a reason. I know. So the last time I was on the show, which hasn't come out yet, but Phil and I talked about Futurama. And it was the day the Emmy nominations came out. And I'm not sure how much of that stays in because it just got contentious. But one of the things...
Not a lot of it's
going to get... Yeah. Nor should it. Most of it's not relevant.
Some of it I was just like, this is a bad look for both of us.
Yeah.
Can I have the audio?
But
sure.
Send me the audio.
But one of the things that came up was I had not watched Ted Lasso yet. Because I was still in that mindset of like, it's a fucking Apple TV show. And I think that the thing that Ted Lasso had going for it and Squid Game had going for it is no one gave a shit about Ted Lasso until people started watching it and liking it.
So true.
And no one gave a shit about Squid Game until people started watching it and liking it, which means because no one was paying attention, anybody that would have been writing pieces about what could be wrong with this thing didn't care about an Apple TV show based on a commercial, and nobody was paying attention to this South Korean drama, dystopian drama that was getting brought to Netflix. So neither of them could be discoursed to death beforehand. And I don't mean this in any kind of like annoying Fox News PC brigade thing. I just mean we all, as people who love media, spend too much time speculating on things from trailers and still images. And by the time the thing actually comes out, we're either mad about something that it didn't do, or we're mad that it didn't do something we wanted it to. A new Nightmare on Elm Street will forever, whatever it is going to be hamstrung by all of the expectations for what a Nightmare on Elm Street is supposed to be. The same way I'm watching people talk about Halloween Kills and be like, I mean, that's not what a Halloween movie is supposed to be. And it's like, you guys accept a movie where people wear masks that turn them evil. You guys accept a movie.
I mean, I don't
disagree. Curse.
I don't disagree with you, but I'll also say that I do think people can be turned around very quickly. Like, if there's one thing to be taken away from the internet or from any of this sort of, film, Twitter, what have you, is that these people don't stand for anything. They'll flip in 5 seconds if they like it, or if it actually speaks to them.
People are just miserable fucking jerk-offs that are just trying to make everyone as miserable as they are. Right. I think another big thing about an Elm Street movie that's kind of going to be hard for it is that it is a franchise that does need a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And like these Halloween movies are like 20 million or maybe less. Like I think the first one was like 15 million. I think this one might be like 20, 25. Like Elm Street, you're going to need, as much as people get crazy about CGI, you're going to need CGI. You're going to need or if you get a filmmaker with enough juice, they'll build sets, but you're going to have to make up Freddy with all that, with his prosthetics. You're going to have to build a lot of visual elements. You can't just run and gun on an iPhone in fucking Louisiana. You know, it's going to be hard for a studio. I mean, which is why it's fucking crazy that David Gordon Green and Blumhouse just fucking ripped Universal off for $300 million to make 3 Exorcist movies, a franchise that has literally not been successful since the first one.
Yeah, and no one cares either.
No one cares. I love all the Exorcist things except for 2. It's actually got a good batting average, but nobody fucking watches them when they come out. So good job, Universal. Good job, David. Get your money.
I agree with you 100% on your theory on Nightmare on a production level. It's the reason why I think I was as drawn and enjoyed this franchise as much as I did, because I did, as I said, I liked all the fantasy. I loved all the production value of it. And if you did that today, it would get expensive. I don't know. I just look at Freddy. I look at the rules. I look at the ability to be able to get fully surreal and weird with it in a way that none of these other properties really can. I think that's exciting, but I agree it could be costly.
Well, that's I think that's almost exactly where like I get off with this franchise.
Yeah.
Which is, if Freddy took Manhattan, it would be a dream.
Yeah.
And it
would be my dream.
Yeah, but it would be a dream. It would be over. Yeah. Whereas Jason taking Manhattan is that franchise like becoming its fully formed nutbag self. And that's what I love about that. And I also like, I it's weird because I always want Michael to go back to Haddonfield, right?
Yeah.
Like when he's not, it feels wrong to me. Like that guy is a suburb stalker. Whereas I want Jason to go to space and to go to Manhattan and to go all over the world, because he is this almost like embodiment of evil that has existed forever and ever, almost this accidental life form that has just been imbued with something. So
do we ever see Jason's face?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Every movie, it's a big like, look at the makeup work we did.
Look how hideous he is. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look at the maggots crawling out of his face. Oh, now he looks like a monster mole man with his split in half face. That's like a big money shot in the third act. Every movie.
Maggots. Who doesn't love maggots?
Jason.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, in terms of the Dream Child, just for a quick second on this episode about the Dream Child. So I for the plot of it really is that I guess Amanda sort of gets pregnant. We don't really know how, but she gets pregnant with this child.
We know how.
Well, he gets her pregnant, but then Freddy essentially hijacks the fetus.
Can I also say the opening of this movie to me with the close-up of body sex scene during the credits is such an insane opening to me, coming off of 4, because 4 is like, here's your virginal main character becoming a superhero, and then 5 is like, look at her getting fucking railed out.
It's like a Tony Scott opening.
It was great. It was beautifully shot. I loved it.
Tom, I'm going to ask you not to be so crass. Can I discuss the beginning of the film real quick?
Oh, Mike's got more extra homework.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Look at him.
Is this the novelization?
You bet it is.
Oh, wow. So it's 4 and 5 in one book?
I paid money for it, so I have to get use out of it.
Okay, cool.
Then I can write this off on my taxes.
Are you going to read to us the opening?
Chapter 1, they were making love in Dan's bedroom, and Alice was reaching her peak, dragging her nails over Dan's back hard enough to leave thin red tracks. She cried out and arched her back as Dan's movements became more intense, and he breathed her name into her ear before he too cried out, and they clutched one another desperately, kissing as if it were their last moment together.
I gotta stop for our listeners' sake. I'm gonna stop you right there.
All right. Hold on.
I am currently because I because
it's not usually that quick.
Yeah. I can't read.
Yeah,
reading's hard for me.
Reading's tough.
I've decided to start listening to the Corrections book on tape. Have you guys? Old man. Have you guys read
Mike?
the Corrections?
Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. Do you remember the scene or the passage where they talk about Chip's screenplay and all the times he mentions the child's or the young woman's breasts? This old man over and over again, her supple breast. Page 14, her supple white breast. Page 16, her adolescent milky white breast. And I'm telling you, there must be 80 readings of this. So it is one of those situations.
Here's a question for you. Was there more sex? Did you feel as though the sex in Barista versus the sex scenes in Corrections?
Did you listen to my ep?
I haven't listened to it yet, but I want to listen to it.
My entire episode with Becky is about what a sex wimp I am, how afraid I am of sex. And
the guy who's probably had a child since we started this episode.
I'm batting 4 for 3, Tom. My slugging is out of control. Okay, so I'm
DJ LeMahieu. I'm Joey Gallo. I'm striking out a lot, but when I fucking hit it, I'm fucking hitting home runs, baby.
Yeah, I'm Antonio Cromartie. Really, I can't even remember their names anymore. But by a whole first half hour with Becky, it's about how uncomfortable I am writing about sex in movies and how I think that should be farmed out to that's what an intimacy coordinator should be. Right. Should be how in Phil, you've written on not really, but you know about medical shows. When they write when they write
yes, we had medical
what the
jargon.
Fuck was I watching with Legal? Oh yeah, all right. Where
Legal was Made.
Yes, Made, exactly. So you're watching Made and they're going legal instead of saying the legal stuff. That's what they actually write into scripts. They actually write into scripts. Like if you're writing medical, you have some pro come in and write the actual medical shit. Legal. You have some pro 19. Come in. Yeah, what you do? Fire.
Okay, and also medical because they're EMTs.
medical.
Okay, you think you feel uncomfortable listening to sex? You feel uncomfortable listening to an audio tape of Corrections? Motherfucker, listen to someone made an audio tape for it. Someone had to vocalize the 12-year-old gangbang in a sewer.
Yeah.
So wait, to clarify, Kenny, you're saying you think there should be somebody else brought in to write the sex scenes in your
Kenny
script.
wants to farm out the sex.
Certainly to block the sex scenes. And there is, but I would just write in my scripts, they have sex, it is good or bad. And then I would have someone who has had a lot more sex than me, with more partners, I mean, so come and figure it out.
Fun fact, I did that for one of Tom's horror films our senior year of college.
You were the sex guy?
So it was a thing where Tom had written...
here's the thing, Tom. I'm telling... My shit's a bit. You actually did this.
My shit's a bit.
No. He took it upon himself to do it. Because, as I'm sure you guys have known with me, I don't do work. I don't do extra work. I shoot it out, and I'm just like, I'm done. So he's just like, ooh, can I make the sex scene better? And I said, sure,
that
whatever.
Must be great for your partners.
Well, that was... So what happened was for Claire...
That's why I'm alone.
For Claire, it was one of those cases where it was film school, and you guys, I don't know how your film school experiences were, but in ours, you got put in groups, and one person was the writer, one person was the director, so on and so forth, right? The guy who was the writer in Tom's group didn't want to do anything. Tom wrote a quick script for a couple pages, but then he asked me could I do a pass on it, just some dialogue stuff or whatever. And he had written this part where basically guy walks up to girl in bar, they're flirting, but you don't hear anything. They go upstairs, and that's it. And I kind of went, what if we flesh this out a bit? And Tom said, do whatever you want. And I wasn't getting graded on it. I wasn't in the group. So I said, let's go to town and wrote this whole thing up and down. So that is actually a thing, Kenny, that can be done.
You could be my sex person.
Listen, I'll check my non-compete, but as long as it's clearable.
You can be my sex person. Is how Kenny asks people out.
I think you would do a good job.
I'm pretty sure that's the audition process for Miramax movies.
Yep. So I do want to ask you guys
some sex person. I think is
some Dream Child questions in terms of what did you think of the asylum stuff? What did you think of the I can only assume that the scale of the Dream Child stroller changes pretty considerably from scene to scene. Were you guys a fan of the effects? Were you a fan of the production? There's some nice matte paintings of the asylum and shit.
The effects are great. Those special effects guys in the 80s, this was like the peak of that time where they were just going full on. Hopkins shoots it well. I mean, like the look of it's great. I think the kill scenes pretty much fucking suck. I think there's no weight to them. They kind of just happen, and you're like, well, this one is dead now. Someone I didn't really give a shit about. I mean, look, it looks good. I mean, they did some good work. Freddy's makeup is kind of shitty, though.
Yeah.
This is not the worst he's looked. He looks worse in 6 because that was clearly, we can only get Robert in the makeup chair for like an hour. Make it as simple as possible. It looks good.
I'll say to all. I mean, a couple things. One, the kills, like Tom's saying, I wasn't bothered by the kills until I read the novelization, where you get a hint of what they were originally supposed to be.
Right.
Because the MPAA, oh goodness gracious, MPAA hamstrung the shit out of him.
Yeah.
So the comic book guy's death with Super Freddy, one of the worst things they've committed to this franchise, wasn't supposed to be that.
Is bad. Yeah.
But it wasn't supposed to be that. But instead, he went into a dream, saw a comic book that said Freddy's Bloody Nightmares or something like that, which was a bit of an in-joke to the fact that Marvel had a Freddy Krueger comic series that they canceled after 2 issues because of parent complaints. He goes into the comic book, and you know how we see it for a second in the movie, that like Take On Me style animation?
Yeah.
Thing? That was supposed to be a sequence. It was supposed to be him inside the comic book, Freddy as comic book Freddy, killing him, which would have looked better. The stuff with the model, the book, the novelization, apparently the original script made a bigger deal out of, like, instead of it just being, oh yeah, the model's parents are on her case, but also she's kind of hooking up with this comic book guy and nobody really cares. They were building up that relationship a lot slower. Some of that was cliche for sure. I don't need to see another movie do the, oh, you drew sketches of me? This is nice. Can I keep one? But at least it was something. And even her death was much more viscerally upsetting about her wasting away and shit like that.
Well, that's the thing that I did wish that they went farther with the sort of anorexia component, because it's turned into like, it almost feels like Monty Python and Meaning of Life when she's eating all that stuff.
They bring that up and never sleep again.
Yeah, like that's
because in the original version they shot, it's not that he just keeps shoving food into her mouth. As she expands, he rips her stomach open and starts feeding herself to her.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Good shit. And that's good shit.
That's the thing with Dream Child, is like so much stuff got cut out. I'll say the Asylum stuff, I have never, and I like this franchise. I like this franchise more than Tom. And even so, I have never loved the 100 Maniacs origin of Freddy.
Okay.
I've never loved that. Like, to me, the idea of just a dude got burned alive and came back, I didn't need that. I also think it's a weird thing. I think that, especially now in the way that we talk about how we depict sexual assault in media, when that happens in the movie, you kind of go like, oh, we're doing that. But then at the same time, like, you have to wrestle in your brain. You're like, yeah, but I've been cool with so much murder. Like, it's a weird thing that you have to do. No, because what I mean is, like,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
It happens, with the maniacs, and you do feel like, oh, can you be doing this? Like, well, I guess you're doing a lot. Like, this is meant to be upsetting. I've never loved that origin thing. It always just feels a little much. I appreciate kind of its pivot into the religiosity of it. I think that when Freddy pops up in the church and yells, "It's a boy," in front of that stained glass, it works for me, but for the same reason that even though the movie sucks, when Pinhead pops up in Hellraiser 3 in the church, I dig it. I think if you were raised Catholic, you either look at a church as a nice place or you go, this whole thing is austere and creepy. These stained glass windows are really uncomfortable. And if you think that, any horror that involves a church is going to freak you out a little bit.
That's so interesting because I definitely clocked watching these movies, and some of the movies we've done in '99, Ninth Gate, Stigmata,
End of Days
to some extent. Whenever a horror movie takes a detour into a church, my brain shuts off because I don't have that thing that you have. I find them neither creepy nor inspiring. I find them mind-numbingly boring, and I don't want Freddy in a church. I just like that's not the only thing that I tried to connect it to why is this even here? Is this wrapped in the mythology? The only thing I think of is 5-6 grab a crucifix, like that. There is something born from the beginning of it that he had. Yeah, but that's not who he is to me.
Well, it's all that Dream Warriors shit. I mean, Dream Warriors, Darabont and Russell, they necessarily had to build up a mythology, and so they did this 100 Maniacs thing, and sort of there's a Catholic element to it, but they never go to a church. They never really dive that deeply into it. It's just kind of this like, here's the thing, and here's how you'll beat them. You can just bury, you got to bury his bones and whatever. 4 and 5
bury his bones, but
obviously bury his bones. Who amongst us hasn't?
Everybody knows the soul is in the bone marrow.
But obviously. But it's this thing of like 4 and 5 having to build upon Dream Warriors and really double down on what Darabont and Russell did. And 4 and 5 are so trying to be more Dream Warriors than the original. Yeah. And none of these guys are Darabont and Russell. And they're getting so lost in the mythology that
totally agree.
All of the, because if you think about Dream Child, 4 people die in the whole movie because they're spending so much time in the second half of the movie going, oh, we got to, find Amanda Kruger buried in a wall somewhere. And, there's this kid, her kid's now like kind of a ghost that's, already just like,
it does.
Hey, I'm Freddy's friend. And then he,
to your point,
on Freddy and kills him.
I do feel like the titular Dream Child is something that needs explaining, where in the previous films, you don't really have that component, right? Where you're just like, it's Freddy, he's coming for these kids. This added wrinkle of the Dream Child essentially being kind of about his rebirth, I guess, to some degree or another. It's kind of muddy and it's kind of unclear.
Yeah, which is another...
I don't know who the Dream Child is. I really don't. I mean,
I'm not sure I do either. But
the Dream Child is the unborn child through which Freddy is able to kind of re-enter Allison's dream psyche because she is the Dream Master. And she's like defeated him. And I think that's pretty clever. I think that what's the actress's name?
Lisa Wilcox.
Lisa Wilcox. I don't think she's up for the task, to be honest. But I just think that Tom said it perfectly. I think Dream Warriors are so awesome and such a great elaboration and build on one. Great cast, but I knew you'd love Dream Warriors immediately because this is the stuff you've been messing with for the last 15 years.
Yeah,
I love shared dreams and dream logic and dreams entering your real life and people. And I know you've also messed around with things in mental health facilities and this idea of like these people being there under false pretenses and no one's believing them. It all really works so well.
It works incredibly well.
And then the take away from that seemed to be that they really liked kind of the dream aspects of it, which is the part that meant nothing to me. Like so I think 4 is pretty cool, and I think 4 has some great kills.
4 has some good stuff in it. It's better than 5 at least.
Like I like 4. I like the waterbed kill so much. I think that's so much fun. But it's
I'll say this too for what it's worth. Like I watched all of these films in a relatively compressed time period. I think Kenny, you did as well. I watched them for the first time this way, so they really are kind of bleeding into each other in a lot of ways, especially the first 6, where it's just sort of 3 through 6 is very much playing in a very similar sandbox, I feel like. So I'm trying to remember like what actually happens in 4 versus what happens in 3. So like there's just I'm just
4 still has the Patricia Arquette character,
but she's been recast.
But she's being recast as Lisa Wilcox.
Tuesday. No. Lisa Wilcox is a new character. It's so instead of Arquette, it's now Tuesday, not Tuesday Weld. Tuesday night. Tuesday night.
I'm looking it up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Tuesday night.
Yeah. So the 3 characters who survived Warriors die.
It's basically first half of the movie is like the epilogue to Dream Warriors, and then the second half is I guess we got to build a new character set now. And which is its own problems.
And Dream Masters, I think Dream Masters has some awesome kills. I think and they have the new friends in that. They have the girl who loves bodybuilding. That's a great kill. They have the nerd. That's a great kill. Like,
I'm looking at the cast right now. Yeah, okay.
I think 4 is kind of just like fun, and I think Freddy's fun in that. And I think 5 is, to your point, Tom, no one dies. There's no one left. I love the girl from summer school, obviously, who doesn't die. Right. And the whole thing kind of feels like 5 is to me the most the most inessential of the entire run. And the third of kind of a trilogy that has diminishing returns each time, and then 6 comes in like House of Fire.
So I want to throw this out there.
Okay,
what do you guys? I think you guys. I didn't think of this until you guys brought it up, and you're talking about it now. Yeah. I think Dream Warriors put them in a really bad position. I think it's a great movie.
Like how to follow it up, you mean?
Well, because here's the thing. With something like Jason, right?
Yeah.
Well, Michael Myers, you basically tell us, is unkillable at the end of the first movie, right? He goes out the window, he's on the ground, and he's gone. He's unkillable. Okay. Jason is unkillable. He's
starts unkillable.
Yeah. Now, with Freddy, in the first movie, you tell us he can be defeated by saying, I don't believe in you. And he's gone.
Right.
Puts you in a tough position for sequels because you've told your audience, just say, go away. He's gone. Dream Warriors, what makes Dream Warriors interesting is these kids are so susceptible, right? They're in this place. They're all being stuck with Freddy. And it's about figuring out, Jesus, how do we defeat this guy?
Yep.
Then at the end of it, they figure out how to defeat him. They figure out they can use their magic and their X-Men dream powers and defeat him. And it rules. And it rules as a movie. But then what you have done is you have now told the audience, this is how you defeat him. You just use your imagination and your dream and you defeat him. How are you now going to get the audience invested in a sequel with, I mean, if you have new characters, that's fine. But I'm saying with like 4 and 5, they basically were in a position where they're like, well, good. Now we've figured out there's magic powers that can defeat him. I guess we have to bring this Dream Master shit into it. I guess we have to do all that. And it puts you in a position where like you lose some of the stakes because we as the audience know how to defeat him. Am I wrong?
I feel like I don't disagree. I would also say too, that there's a logistical issue here, and it's what Tom referred to earlier. This idea that like we're shooting this movie here, we're releasing this movie here, and we don't really give a shit what comes out on the other side of it, which is sort of ironic because 4 is really successful. So I guess the impression they get is we got to get something out there fast in order to hit while the iron's hot.
I think that was a thing then, and I think there was an expectation that you wanted that you expected a new one of these almost every year.
I mean, Halloween 5 had the same problem this year as well. You know, hot off the heels of Halloween 4, they rushed Halloween 5 out. Jason was already on a one-a-year schedule to begin with. So, I mean, Jason Takes Manhattan was just, you know, a happy accident that it was so fantastic. I think...
Isn't it crazy to think of a time, though, where, like, you had a new horror franchise installment every year?
Well,
you had three. You had three iconic franchises going one a year, basically.
And The Purge basically did it, too. I mean, this does make sense to some extent, and hopefully, because I agree. I think Escape Room's great. I think the second one's a lot better than the first, also. But I think they can keep doing those for fun too. I think there's something I want to bring up with you guys, and I don't mean this. I'm not trying to be provocative or start a fight.
Oh God.
Oh boy.
But you were just talking, Mike, about how 3 boxed them into a corner, and we've been talking about this franchise. And we have not mentioned 2 at all, except when I made the joke about how great it is when she kisses Freddy at the end. Now, 2 is wrapped up in all of this, you know, allegory about being closeted and all that stuff. But what I want to talk about is Freddy coming into the real world and being a menace. Now, I know that was Wes Craven's bête noire, where he's like, you just ruined the series. I'm positing, what if they didn't? I'm positing, what if that was kind of the secret sauce to extend the life of this series? But go ahead.
You don't want that. You don't want that.
No, because I mean, really, at the end of the day, why would Freddy want to come back? He's got the sweetest gig in the world. He's not like Michael or Fred or Jason, where he's like got to deal with the fucking cops here. Let me fold this guy in half. Let me deal with this. You know, Freddy's literally just, I'm going to torture the shit out of kids, make their lives miserable until I finally turn them into motorcycles. If he comes into the real world, I mean, he's got no power.
Build on, yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
I will also say, and I'm going to bring up a franchise that I love that mostly isn't good, and I will own this up front. I love the Hellraiser franchise. I have always found the Hellraiser premise...
Mr. Pinhead's
really
franchise?
Yes. Because that's the key thing. Is that in the first and second Hellraiser, it's not Pinhead's franchise, right? Mm-hmm. Pinhead is not actually the villain in this series. The whole idea of how familiar are you guys with Hellraiser?
I've seen the first.
None. I've never seen any of them.
So the whole premise of Pinhead and the other Cenobites, the guys you see in all the posters, is that they are essentially angels of pain in a way, right? That they are so far down the rabbit hole of this BDSM kind of like pain for pleasure thing that people who want to experience the ultimate pain open this puzzle box and summon them. So their whole vibe for the first 2 movies is like somebody opens the puzzle box, a bad dude opens the puzzle, and they show up and they're like, somebody called us for weird kinky hook stuff, so we're going to do it because you called us. No, but like truly, like that's the kind of thing. And it is kind of like, you know, the thing about like when Candyman shows up and you say his name, or Beetlejuice, where it's like, you said it. Somebody asked me to come here. And then everybody who watched those 2 movies, who loved Hellraiser, were like, yeah, but oh my God, Pinhead should get like even more evil. Pinhead should come into the real world. Pinhead should want to take over. And then they do it in 3. Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. It's like Pinhead no longer is just the stoic like guardian of like, I'm going to make you suffer because that's what you want. Instead, he now shows up and he's like, I'm going to take over. And as soon as that happens, you go, oh, everything unique about this world is gone. The thing that makes Hellraiser so interesting to those of us that like it is it goes, they're summoned. They don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're coming on an invite. The thing about Freddy that makes him so interesting is the way that he haunts dreams, is the fact that you can't fall asleep. the thing that we like about horror franchises, and especially those of us who like writing and care about film, is that your franchise is going to establish rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's what separates all of the major slasher franchises. You know, the Michael, the Freddy, even the Jason, even the Chucky and Scream, and all of them. They establish rules, and then they go, you're coming back to see what we can do within the frame that we've established. You're coming back to nightmare movies because we know it's going to be dreams. We know Freddy's going to start dreams. What can we do with that? If you take that away, then what you have done, unless you're creating a premise where Freddy has the same magic in the real world, which then you take out the stakes of falling asleep, which is so compelling, or he's just a guy with knives on his fingers, in which case I can get that in 1,000,001 slashes. So I don't know if you want to take those rules off, because when Hellraiser did it, suddenly they just became weird detective thrillers with a guy with nails in his face.
And at the end of the first one, the whole hook is we got to get this guy out of the dream so we can defeat him. And then in the second one, his whole plan is, I'm going to get out of the dream world and do stuff.
Yeah. Well, the second one is bad. But anyway.
Terrible fucking movie.
Okay.
It's interesting. It's interesting to watch. It's very interesting to watch. Love watching Clu Gulager fight a fucking bird on a wire.
It's Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is the most fun of the not good movies. I will watch it more than I watch movies that in that franchise that I think are just bad.
I don't think that it's that bad, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay.
What I was presenting to you, haters, was not necessarily
don't hate the play, hate the game,
baby. Doing it like Nightmare 2, or doing it like you so eloquently evoked in Hellraiser 3. The question isn't why wouldn't it work? The question is, could it work? And without question, to me, there are ways for it to work. Like I found, I guess I'm showing my ass a little bit. I found the premise of Nightmare 2 to be compelling. I like the idea, in theory, that Freddy views the dream world as a prison, and he wants to get out of it. And I believe that to some extent. Like I hear you saying, like, I have all this power in the dream world. Why would I want to leave? Well, at some point, you know, it might not be that much fun anymore. He might want to take on a new challenge. Now, I'm not saying I have the answer, but I am trying to say to your point about rules. I love rules, and I love rules for all the reasons you said. And I also love rules because they put a line in the sand and they say, don't cross this line under any circumstances. And then you cross the line. And that's the thing. Like the truly scary thing to me is I'm doing everything right. I'm not going to bed. I'm drinking caffeine and doing cocaine and staying awake. And I figured out how to be Freddy in the dream. And I don't believe him and all this stuff. Like I have watched the horror movies and now he is fucking sitting on my toilet. Oh no. Then there's the Inception. Then there's the Inception question. Am I still in a dream? So I think it's fun to be had.
So I don't. Listen. I don't want Freddy sitting on my toilet either. Number one, who knows what that guy's eating in the other world?
It's terrifying.
He's gonna put my pipes to the limit. I don't want that. I don't think it works. Taking Freddy out of the real. Because I think the beauty of Freddy's becoming a dream god basically is that he can now drop all the pretense he had as a human, having to pretend to be a normal human being. I work a job. I put up the front that I'm a nice guy. He doesn't have to do it anymore. He's elementally what he's always wanted to be. I chase kids and I fucking kill them. That's it. You bring him. I mean, it strips all the humanity out. He's a monster in the real world, but he has to pretend to be a human. He doesn't have to pretend anymore. So you take that element away. Why would he want to come back to the real world? It just kind of breaks.
That's your job as the writer.
Well, but I think there's also.
I don't think that.
The other thing to bounce off what Tom's saying, there's also the subtext that to me is what Freddy represents, which is now, look, I'm no fan of the decade, the 1980s, for a number of reasons. But but one of the things that I look at that Elm Street really taps into for me about the 80s and what it represents is that Freddy becoming the dream god isn't just a device. It also represents kind of what we learned about the 80s, which is you parents went to such extremes and did 1,000,001 things that you thought made your kids safer and that you thought would be good for your kids. You went to such extremes out of the conservative panic, the moral panic, the satanic panic. And in fact, you made things worse. Like, you did all of these things and you in fact made things so much worse. I think a lot about, and this is going to sound weird at left, did any of you guys watch the Action Park documentary they put on HBO Max?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Chris Gethard has a great line in there talking about Action Park, but also talking about growing up in the 80s, where he says, when we're talking to our friends, we laugh about how fucked up it all was, but when we're with our therapists, it's just fucked up. And I think about that, like, there's so much shit that, like, 80s babies or 80s kids talk about where you're like, Jesus. And the thing that makes Freddy so compelling to me and about him being the dream god is the fact that it's about that these parents went, good, we got rid of the bad thing. We put it under the rug. We set him on fire. We buried it. And that's it. And now everything's going to be fine. And in fact, they damned their kids to die in the most brutal ways and in a way that they can't even reach them. Freddy is, even though he was a bad guy, he is also the chickens coming home to roost for small town America, basically trying to take matters into their own hands and get frontier justice on somebody.
I mean, Wes was very upfront about it throughout his entire life since that movie came out, was that the first movie was really him tackling the idea of divorce, and this is like a generation of kids, the first kind of generation that had to grow up with divorce, and using that Freddy element as this dark element in this generation of like the boomers, that there's something that they did in their generation that didn't happen in their other generation that has infected not just them but their kids. So their kids are living this life kind of without their parents. Like in the first one, Tina's mom's away, so she has her biker boyfriend come over to have sex with him. Nancy's parents are either divorced or in the middle of a divorce, and her mother's a drunk and her father's kind of just not really there for her. Like, bringing them into the real world, essentially. Kenny, you're wrong, and I'm gonna have to send you to kangaroo court for that one.
No, I hear everything you guys are saying, but I also can't get over the fact that only 2 of these movies are really successful. So we're riding for now, New Nightmare notwithstanding, we're riding for something that I think has been shown to have a pretty short shelf life. And I do think that we need the new thing or the next thing. And I wonder, okay, let's say he can't go into the real world, even though I strongly disagree with you guys. What is the new thing? Let's do it. What is the 2021 thing that reinvigorates this franchise in a Halloween reboot or a Halloween Rob Zombie reboot kind of way? It can be whatever you guys want.
I think a lot of it's what we were talking about with the remake. They need to make text that Freddy didn't do it, and that it's kind of that 80s satanic panic has festered and became a thing now, which we're dealing. I mean, what's the MAGA shit other than white people trying to relive the glory days, but the glory days was just filled of poisonous hatred that has now gotten worse. I mean, MAGA is just Reaganism on fucking PCP. I think
just make Freddie Q.
I mean, I said the other day to Mike, there's an element that I wish they did in one of these movies, is that while Freddy is killing the kids, he's doing it in a way to make it look like the parents are killing their kids, so that the parents go to jail suffering, knowing that the guy they killed their child, and now they have to rot in jail for it.
That's adding also this, an episode of Freddy's Nightmares.
Well, there you go. I'm as good as an 80s Canadian TV writer.
Here's the thing. I agree. Like, the thing about Nightmare that's tough, and Tom talks about the Peter Jackson script and so many things they tried to do. The difficult thing about the Nightmare franchise to not do a Gordon Green is that because it's so expensive. Like, look, I think if and you guys just binged these series recently, but like, if either of you got called in and they said, we need to do a new Nightmare on Elm Street, what's your take? I think the two of you could churn out at least 3 or 4 really interesting ideas that when they're talked about in a documentary, somebody goes, holy shit, I wish we could have seen that. I think even Tom and I, who have never sold a script, if they called us into a room, we could pitch, 3 or 4 or 5 like ideas that you would go, holy shit, that's super interesting. I think that the challenge becomes once you're doing that, and once you're doing something that expensive with that much riding on it, does that get through? I mean, the Nightmare franchise is the most fertile ground of any of these slasher franchises because you have a million avenues to go. Yes, right. You can send Jason to any location, but at the end of the day, he's still a guy with a machete, and unless you fill him with nano robots to turn him into half machine or you make him a Satan worm, he's going to be that. The Halloween franchise, it took a while for them to figure it out when they realized, right, it's the tension between him and Laurie, or it's Michael's psychology. Elm Street, you've got a million avenues you can go because you've opened up the possibilities with this magic and this dream world. But we keep going back to the same kind of well, mostly because by the time it gets through all the executives and all the money people, and it gets through all of the complications of, well, I want to do this. Well, that's too expensive. Let's put him in a comic book. We can't do that. I want to build this practical set. We can't do that. By the time you get through all of that, are they going to let you take any kind of risks with this character?
Here's the thing, and this is interesting for our moment. HBO Max has every one of these movies currently streaming.
Except for Freddy versus Jason.
You said they did, or they do?
I don't think. Maybe they did. I wasn't looking for it.
I think they do, but I'm not 100%. Okay,
I don't care about whether they have Freddy versus Jason. I'm just saying they are putting this out there. They put it on the front page for a while, and I bet it's on the front page for October. I have absolutely no doubt that Warner Media is actively hearing Nightmare on Elm Street takes.
For sure.
Today, a year ago, a year from now, when you have a character who's that iconic, they need to bring him back out specifically to show the world we still have him and we can still make money with him. So they, to your point, I think that now is the time, more than any other time in history, that they'd be willing to take a risk with this character solely because they want to show that he exists, he's still profitable, and like kind of most importantly, that he's nimble, right? That you can continue to use him
literally and figuratively. Yeah.
So Freddy's got some moves. So
I mean, I feel like we are days away from Krueger with like the backstory. The Wonka version of Freddy Krueger is definitely
well. All right, so here's a big element for why I also think there might be issues with we haven't heard anything yet. I think Robert Englund is such a big shadow over this, and the reception to Jackie Earle Haley was so negative,
tepid,
that I think even studios, for as feckless and numbers oriented as they are, aren't dumb enough to realize that, we're going to have a big mountain to climb because Freddy is so personality based. How do we We failed miserably once. How do we get over that?
But the failure of Jackie Earle Haley is that he's not funny, right? Like that he doesn't have much charisma in that way. I think there's any number of actors out there that could fill.
Ooh, you know who should do a Nightmare on Elm Street? James Gunn.
Would watch.
Of course. All right, so there's another example of Warner's recently doing this incredibly successfully, and that's It. And you would have looked at the Tim Curry version of It and said, no, that's it. We're done. Maybe never. I mean, not the movies, but the characterization.
Yeah.
We'll never do that again. And I've seen it a lot because it is a horror movie that Rollins loves, and I love the first part. And Bill Skarsgård is amazing.
Your son's watching that movie. I know. No, I'm just thinking of your 7-year-old son.
He's 9. He just did an hour-long pretend podcast with his 13-year-old cousin on It. He's like, I've seen it so many times.
Pretend podcast?
Yeah, like we're doing right now.
No one's gonna listen to this.
No. So I don't think that the I don't think they would be dissuaded by the Robert Englund part. I think they can find somebody. I think James Gunn would kick ass. I think that's a really good call.
But you know what? Going to what Mike said about the executives thing, Cary Fukunaga was going to do It, but because he was so vision oriented, so like story first, that the studio got spooked. He basically left because they wouldn't let him make the movie he wanted. Andy Muschietti inherited that first movie, and then we saw what his second movie was. And
the second movie's awful. Well, the thing with Stephen King is you better come with a vision that is not taking taking the stuff from the page.
Basically, you need to be Mike Flanagan.
It's always weird on the page what he does. It never strikes me right visually. Yes, exactly.
Well, that's why the second one's Mike Flanagan.
The second one's awful, but I got to think that they want to do this now. Like, I mean, look, this is the bad take, but like, I wouldn't be. I think it's almost too obvious. I don't mean this in a bad way. Like the they should do it version is Freddy didn't do it, and I think you almost do the Fast and the Furious 9 version, where you're showing something in modern day and you're showing something. You're doing flashbacks to when Freddy was first murdered, and I think that could work, but it wouldn't be that fun.
No,
can I throw something else out there? And with regards to, you mentioned now would be the time to do an Elm Street. I'm praying it's not, because I'm praying that before they decide to do a new Elm Street, we have moved on from everybody trying to do Jordan Peele. Because right now, I think one of the problems we have with horror today, or a lot of horror today, is when you look at what made horror movies great in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, even somewhat 90s, especially 60s, 70s, and 80s, these are movies that are about something, and these are movies that explore theme, without a doubt. But when you talk to the people that made them, George Romero will tell you outright, and he said in many interviews, I didn't sit down to make a movie about Vietnam. I didn't set out to make a movie about race relations. I thought about what scared me. I came up with this zombie movie, and then the themes were in the air, right?
1,000,000%, dude.
And it's amazing. And the stuff that's in Halloween, and the stuff that's in Elm Street, the stuff we all love, that's in Omen and Exorcist, that stuff that was in the air. The problem now is that, yes, we had The Witch, we had other elevated horror films, but it really feels like Get Out was a lightning rod moment, and not just because it got Oscar nominations, but because everybody looked at that and went, oh my God, this is about something. This is so compelling. This is so interesting. But Jordan Peele is a dyed-in-the-wool horror guy, and he admitted that, and he wanted to make something scary. And I think that's why people had problems with, understanding Us the first time around, because it's less obvious about what it's discussing. My problem with a lot of horror now is that the people who are making it start from a place of, what do I want to say?
You should never do that.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, and
you should never do that. I totally agree with you.
Like, I went to go see, and I liked it to some degree, but I went to go see The Night House. And the problem with The Night House, and the problem with so many movies, I know people had this problem with the Black Christmas remake and a number of things, and some people had that problem with Candyman. The problem with The Night House is that for the first 3/4 of the movie, it's a really interesting haunting movie. It's about whatever it is, a haunted house, however you want to feel it. And then the last 15 minutes decide to go very directly and tell you, this is about grief. This is about grief. I represent your grief. You need to learn to move on. And it's clear that started from somebody going, I want to make a thing about grief. So the problem with, and it's what people I think miscategorize when people talk about horror movies, and you have people who criticize it and go, it's too woke. They're trying to make it woke. No, they're not trying to make it woke. It's not that. It's not a PC thing at all. But it is a thing where people are starting from a place of, what do I want to say? What do I want to explore? Every horror movie that comes out now, or even not horror movie, like, we're all getting tired of everything that just goes, it's about trauma, it's about grief, it's about gender. Those are the three themes.
Did you see that clip of Jamie Lee Curtis today that was trending on Twitter?
No, what happened?
There was literally a super cut of her saying how Halloween is about trauma.
Yeah, and it's like, but you know what? That's because that's the line we want to hear. And it's weird that, like, I know people rolled their eyes when they went, WandaVision's about trauma. It's like, yeah, but guys, this is the thing we've been telling them we want to hear on Tumblr for, 50 years or whatever. Yeah.
Everything's so gracelessly didactic these days is basically what we're coming down to.
Yeah. And so if you're doing Elm Street, if you're doing Elm Street, it needs to start from a place of what scares me in 2021, and then go, what is it about that relates to the real world? That's what works so well about, like, Nightmare on Elm Street came from Wes Craven was interested in sleep paralysis. He remembered a creepy guy standing outside his window. And then he started from there. And as he was writing that, started tapping into, okay, but what's scary about this? And that's when he found the elements of divorce. That's when he found these things. The same way John Carpenter was given The Babysitter Murders. And started writing from there because he liked the original Black Christmas and Babysitter Murders. And then he finds the themes in that. The same way he found the themes watching Thing from Another World. You have to start from what scares you. And if you don't, then yeah.
Here's the thing, and it connects to dreams. Your body, your brain is writing stories all the time. You are writing stories in your dreams all the time. You are not writing themes and then looking for a story. The fun thing about dreams is then going to your shrink, telling them the things that happened and figuring out what that actually means. You should do the same thing with writing. You should come up with the story first, and you will surprise yourself when you start to realize what you really care about. Anytime someone reads my stuff, they always are like, wow, you really care about class. And it's like, well, shit, I guess I do, because I'm pretty fucking obsessed with it. Although I'm not actively being like, I want to tell a story about class. I want to tell a story.
I had that with Mike, and he goes, do you realize all the stuff you write has elements of, like, race issues in it? And I went, didn't think about it. If you went up to John Carpenter and said, "Oh, well, did you purposely put in all that stuff about white flight and the safety of the suburbs into Halloween?" He'd go, "No, I was just making a movie where a guy killed."
But it was in him, these things. Yeah. That's the best part about this stuff. You should not. Frankly, you should not know what's in your subconscious until it comes out through your art. That's why we do this.
It's with all this gracelessly didactic shit about trauma, and like we had Hereditary that was pretty good in my opinion until the end where it explains the entire themes to you. Like I watched Hereditary, I'm like, Rob Zombie made the better version of this in Halloween 2, and he didn't have to tell you every 5 minutes it's about trauma. He just exploded this vision onto the screen and said, "You fuckers parse it out." I also don't know if now's the right time for Freddy, because their reception to Halloween Kills is so weirdly negative, because it's a lot more ambitious than I think people wanted it to be. I think it's going to spook Warner into, if they were going to make one, to be, well, we got to make it safe. We can't be ambitious. Look what they did to David and Blumhouse when they tried to be so ambitious with Halloween Kills. Same thing happened to Rob with Halloween 2. We got to play it safe. And that's not what Freddy needs. Freddy doesn't need to be safe.
So as we attempt to land this plane at 2 hours and 15 minutes, you brought up Carpenter, so I want to talk They Live for a second.
Oh, yeah, Phil, what'd you think, boy?
By the way, I bought patches, too. I never showed them. They're beautiful. I have to make these purchases. Oh, and a shot glass. I have to make these purchases worth it.
That's a fucking great shot glass.
They Live is a pretty interesting.
Fuck you. I got Friday the 13th playing cards. Fuck you. Hey. Fuck Freddy.
They Live is an interesting movie to talk about off this conversation because it's almost the exception to this rule.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you guys about this because John Carpenter's not my guy. He's never been my guy. He's not going to be my guy on the other side of this Blank Check miniseries. And I don't say that oh wow. All right, I'm sorry. But this is the thing. I was watching They Live and I was like, this movie's made for Tom and Kenny. Like, this movie was made for you guys. Yeah. Like I really feel like it, and that is obviously not with any judgment. That is just like, this is scratching,
saying, bro.
This is scratching so many itches and checking so many boxes for you guys. And I'm watching it, and I'd be lying if I said I really locked into it. It wasn't that I hated it. I
radical communists who love wrestling.
Yeah.
and also sort of like anti-establishmentarianism and like, trying to blow up the system from within. These are all things that I associate with both of you guys. So my point more than anything is I pressed play on this film. Obviously, I'm following along with the Blank Check miniseries, and we're at sort of a fulcrum point in his career. He does these 2 films with an independent studio where he's basically given carte blanche to do whatever he wants within like a $2 million budget. And I just Roddy Piper,
brilliant,
not a great
casting. Excuse you. God damn you.
I'm surprised. I'm actually surprised that's your take, to be honest.
It's one of my takes. He's not terrible. He's not terrible, but he's also like, when I hear about the version where Kurt Russell played the lead role, that's the movie that I want to see.
I understand that that's the movie you want to see. I
understand that that's not the movie you guys want to see.
Well, but, it's just it's too fucking serious with Kurt Russell. I don't know how else to,
really. I don't even think it's too serious. I think Kurt is great at playing lunkheads, but Roddy Piper has a specific lunkheaded quality where you better believe it's easier to believe him being so confounded throughout the entire movie and reacting to everything that happens to, well, I'm just going to pick up a shotgun and just shoot everything in sight.
It's great. He's also
like Kurt brings something that's even Jack Burton's a little smarter than Nada.
Right.
Where like Nada has to be kind of a dummy, like a good-hearted dummy who's going to do the right thing. But Jack Burton's first instinct isn't, I'm going to pick up a gun and just shoot everyone in a bank.
Yeah, he's so fucking low status. He is the lowest status hero of an action movie I have ever seen.
And the wrestler is low status.
Yes, and that's what it is. And having seen so many movies starring wrestlers pre-Rock, like no matter what, you are walking on the fucking sub-basement of your expectations for this hero. And there's something so liberating and rewarding about seeing Roddy Piper rise to the occasion. But like, no, this guy is homeless. It's truly wild how much of a loser he is at the beginning of this movie.
Oh, for sure.
It's also you saying that it's the exception to the rule of the thing we were talking about of how graceless it is in its themes, how it's very much, these are the themes.
Yeah,
they live, money is God. That's wrestling storytelling. Roddy Piper is a wrestler. It's very much, he's going to be, what? There's aliens and they're subliminally, numbing us? What? You got to believe this. It's an over-the-top, superheated, almost like if Douglas Sirk was a fucking meathead who went to the gym kind of storytelling, where it's just this overheated melodrama, but with guns instead of people kissing.
Right. Well, okay. I mean, you guys can't be shocked that this film didn't hit me in the way that it hits you guys.
Well, listen, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
And that's fair. And by the way, like I really don't mean to take anything away from, I think that John Carpenter is obviously a brilliant filmmaker. It's more about the fact that, like, you know, it's just not a milieu that speaks to me in the way that it speaks to other people. And when I pressed play on this and the movie started, I was like, okay, so I knew what I was in for within the first 10 minutes. And it's a very good movie in the sense that it's got really interesting themes. It's just the wrestling component, and Kenny can speak to this maybe better than anybody, is something that I struggle with. It's just something that I can't fully lock into.
You mean the actual fighting? Like the 6-minute fight between him and Keith David?
That was truly ridiculous. Like, I was absolutely taken out of the movie during that scene.
Well, Phil, have you ever, I don't know, say on a podcast that you host with a specific man who maybe doesn't agree with you about everything, have you ever felt like trying to get him to see your point is like getting into a 6-minute fist fight in a back alley of Los Angeles?
I have. You should listen to our Topsy Turvy episode. I definitely feel like there are...
Karen Hahn is the Miss Elizabeth of that one.
Sure. I guess I just can't fully get on board with a movie like this that is just kind of, I don't even know what the right word is for it, but there's times where I was just watching it being like, am I really supposed to believe what's happening in front of me right now? Like, am I supposed to emotionally be attached to anything that's going on?
That's kind of part of what's going on, dude. It's what I think I love about it is it's okay. Let's assume the crazy ass conspiracy theorists are real. This is what they think. This is what it looks like. I think that's part of the fun of it. But I get that. I also kind of tap into, like, look, and I've been fucking bitching to you a lot about this lately. Is like, this isn't that far from what's really going on. You know,
no,
this isn't that far.
No,
Can I jump in for one second?
Please, Mike. Yeah,
I have two things I need to note. One, the beginning of this They Live discussion is how I imagine it felt to be a Roman when they were feeding the Christians to the lions back in the day. Because Phil walked in and got 2 sentences out before he was just pounced upon and shredded apart. It was truly a case of, we have a Messiah. Done. Ripped apart. Did not even get a chance to breathe. But 2, Phil, I want to qualify this. I get you. Thank you. And I get where you're at. Now, I like John Carpenter. Of John Carpenter's filmography, They Live is a movie I have watched twice. And it is a movie that if Tom has it on and I'm over there, I'll watch it. I don't know when I'm going to consciously watch it again. It's not one of the higher up ones for me in his filmography. I respect it for what it is, and I enjoyed it when I watched it. But it's not one, unlike a Big Trouble or an Escape from New York, where I'm like, oh my God, I want to revisit this world again and again and again. They Live is not my thing. I got it and I enjoyed it for what it is, and I have no problem with people who enjoy it more. I think there's also something to be said for, I don't feel this way about John Carpenter, but the way you're talking about John Carpenter is how I feel about Michael Mann. I watch his movies and go, these are good movies. These are well-made movies. I am not going to tell anyone they're wrong who says they like them. I enjoy Heat to some degree. I love Thief. And I enjoy Manhunter and Last
Insider.
The Insider, yes. But even so, like,
you like a lot.
But I respect them and I enjoy them. But I'm not like coming away from it like some of these guys are, where it's like, oh my God, you're telling me he made a 5-hour cut? I must see it. No, I'm good. So I get it. With They Live, it's a very particular wavelength, though, and I think that part of it. They mentioned the wrestling component. I also think it's a thing of, if you're watching it with the idea of trying to get invested in the characters and trying to lose yourself in the reality of it, it's a waste of time, because it's not like that. And it doesn't have to be. It's kind of like, yes, there's the wrestling element, but it's also like, I don't know, when you go see community theater. And I don't mean that in a dismissive way. No, but I don't mean that in a dismissive way of like, when I go see community theater, particularly if it's like, if I'm taking, if it's like a kid's production of like Cinderella and like my neighbors are in it or something like that. Mm. I never lose myself and sit down. There's never a point where I watch it like with Kurt Russell. I love Kurt Russell. I know who Kurt Russell is, but when I'm watching Escape from New York, that's Snake Plissken. It stops being Kurt Russell, becomes Snake Plissken. Yeah, when I watch They Live, it never stops being Roddy Piper.
That's okay for me.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't bother me.
In this particular movie, that's part of the charm of it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like when I go to see the community theater, I know that that's not actually. It would be wrong of me at this to sit back and go. Know. But I'm saying it'd be wrong of me to sit back and go, that's not Cinderella. That's the local librarian.
Well, but can I just
what you're saying is, and I think this is fair, that knocking Roddy Piper's acting abilities is punching down. And that's the whole point of this movie, to me, to some extent, right? That Roddy Piper is, in a lot of ways, the last guy you'd expect, but his lack of experience, both as a thespian and the lack of his character's experience as a hero, I think lends itself really well to this particular piece.
Well, because it's also not. They Live isn't a horror movie insofar as, I mean, it is, but only insofar as like the movies that I love growing up are 50s sci-fi drive-in movies, right? The Blob. It came from outer space, those kinds of things. It's much more an alien invasion movie, which I guess is a type of horror, but it's also a sci-fi. And as a result, like when I go, if you watch The Blob, the original Blob or any of this, they're not asking you to buy Steve McQueen as a renegade teenager or anything like that. It's kind of just saying like, look, we're going to do this. We're putting on the show for you. Take the ride. They Live is a parable. In its way, it's not meant to be. It is a parable. It's not meant to be dissected as a work of realism or even as a work of artistic depth. It is a warning and it is a parable, and it's kind of like, like any parable, like any kind of religious parable or anything like that. You're not really meant to sit back and go, I don't know if I buy that the father takes back the son who left for a long time. It's like, but he does, because it's about something more than that. So I think that. They Live is not,
the movies it's closest to me are I don't know how you feel about these movies, but they're the Verhoeven movies.
It very much so.
Spiritually, it's RoboCop, it's Total Recall, and it's these movies that you can pick them the fuck apart, like completely tear them apart if you want to. And that's not a bad thing to do, but if you're willing to go along with those rides, there's some really fun and interesting stuff going on there.
It's specifically Starship Troopers.
Troopers
with him casting soap opera actors to make the point that fascists don't have any depth.
I will say
in the future we'll all be beautiful.
I will say that the thing that has the pleasant surprise, I guess, or I'm not sure what the right word to describe rewatching some of these Carpenter films and seeing some of these for the first time is how much he enjoys gleefully ending his films on just in crazy ways. Like that he just sort of the end of The Thing, the end of Escape from New York, the end of They Live, all of these have really great kind of weird final beats.
He loves his downer endings. At best, his endings will be bittersweet. Like They Live ends with, he stops the signal, so now everybody knows that the aliens are here, but Nada dies, and he ends on. I truly love how ballsy and silly it is of a woman realizing she's having sex with an alien, and the guy just going, "What's wrong?"
It's so crazy.
It's a great ending. It's a great final moment.
I mean, he
does this all the time.
I mean, Halloween's got that great ending. Like you said, The Thing, Escape from New York, with him fucking over the president and basically sending the world to another war. He's a guy that I mean, like even Starman, maybe his nicest movie is like, the alien's still going away, but like at least he's leaving her with a baby. But you know, she's alone.
That final shot of Starman is fucking gorgeous. But I mean, it's a gorgeous final shot.
I also think that there's something unique about They Live in his filmography insofar as while the rest of his films, and they can be nihilistic and they can be, you know, extreme, he's still, for the rest of his filmography, writing as a, you know, his scripts are intricate. He's exploring a lot of themes. He's exploring a lot of ideas, and a lot of it is subtextual, you know, in Halloween or Prince of Darkness or even later in The Mouth of Madness or anything like that. What's so fascinating about They Live is that it is so direct, that it is so blunt, that it is so much a criticism of the Reagan 80s and done with a tone of voice that conveys its exasperation. It's the only movie of his that's exasperated, that's just going, how is everyone okay?
Yeah, how do you not see
this? Because I can only imagine, like, because I've the closest I've come to living through the 80s, you know, I was born in 1990. The closest I've come is when I look back on like the early years of like the George W. Bush era when I was a teenager. And amongst young people, there was this kind of feeling of like, this is kind of weird how we're like teetering into like some fascistic shit. But because there was a national tragedy to rally behind, like it was very quickly silenced. And it was a confusing time. When I look at the 80s and like the nostalgia people have for the 80s, I mean, granted, when I look at it, all I see is around Contra and the AIDS crisis and all the terrible things that we all ignored. But it is baffling to me. And They Live is so compelling insofar as one of the things that I love when you look at an artist's work, whether it's a filmography or a discography or anything, is that one time when they get so exasperated, they just break form. And Carpenter is such a smart, sophisticated storyteller most times. It's so subtextual most times that Reagan and the Reagan 80s blew his mind so much that we were so willfully submitting to that, like Kenny says, he becomes Paul Verhoeven, which he's not. And instead, he just has to be so blunt and over the top to be like, it is, you know, to use the quote, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like, how is this reality? And I love anytime
this is such a good point,
like
Mike. And this is such a good point. It remind you know what it reminds me of? It is his Bullworth moment, but it worked.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you see it so often because what seems to happen is people like Warren Beatty will quote unquote break, like I think he probably did, and then write a movie about someone who broke. Right? And then write some crazy shit that happened. That's not what Carpenter did here. Carpenter is out here fucking rapping and being like, is this how I need to get through to you? It was such a good, we should put that like at the front of the episode. That was so good. I loved that.
And you know what? For as blunt as the movie is, fucking idiots will misread that movie.
Oh yeah.
So much so to the point that in the ramp up to 2016's election, people were trying to be like, They Live, it's about how the Jews run everything. And Carpenter had to come out and be like, no, I made it because I hate you fucking morons. And I don't want you watching my movie. You guys are the bad guys. Like, so sometimes even a shotgun blast of unsubtlety is going to be just deflected by the morons of the world.
It is the hardest thing to do what he did. It is the hardest thing to do and have it work. Because I'm thinking about now, what the comparable art was, you know, commercial art was during the Bush era. And like, you know, it was really bad shit like American Dreams or W that didn't work because it's hard to do this. And what we got during the Trump era, I don't even know what we got during the Trump era. I don't even know if anybody came out and tried anything like this.
Well, you couldn't do it in the Trump era because the Trump era and even the Bush era, but particularly the Trump era, you couldn't make that art because essentially what They Live is about is it's looking at everybody, the world, and saying, how is everyone how are you overwhelmingly voting for Ronald fucking Reagan? There's an exasperation because it doesn't make sense. In the Trump era, we all went, yeah, I know exactly the people who voted for that guy. We also know exactly how many people didn't.
Right.
And it's basically a case of like, there's a wall up and it's an us versus them thing. The thing about They Live and the thing about the 80s is it wasn't an us versus them. It was a, oh my God, what have we become? And anybody who tried to do a what have we become for the Trump era didn't land, because a lot of people, particularly people in minority groups, went, this wasn't us. It was never us. It's your weird cousins. Sort them out. You know, it's with the Trump era, the proper, thing to grapple with is, Jesus, how did we let it get here? What did we miss along the way? And with the Bush era, the only effective art, and I know it seems tacky now, but the only effective art in a way was like, I remember being a teenager in high school and American Idiot came out, and it felt important then, because it just kind of felt like, oh, good, punk rock is serving its purpose again, sort of. But even then that got washed out because the Bush era was so confusing, because it was kind of like you could criticize the policies, but at the time especially, it was like, yeah, but what do we do? And everybody went, I don't know. All media
for
6 years after 9/11 just went, I don't know what to do.
Well, what's interesting is, because all right, so American Idiot, I also, the one that was jumping in my head was the Megalomaniac song. I can't remember what band did that, but there was some pop band that did the Megalomaniac song, and it was all over the place how much people in the arts hated Bush. What actually did work and actually did move the needle were the Michael Moore documentaries.
Yeah,
and that was the way, and to some extent South Park, which is very anti-Bush at the time, and there was a way to get at him that we just didn't. Because I agree with everything you're saying, Mike, but we just didn't really land on how to get at this Trump era. And I think a lot of it is what you're saying, because so much of the best art of the last 4 years came from people who have been historically oppressed. And a lot of that has been like, leave us the fuck out of this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I also think, like you mentioned with the Bush era, part of the problem with the Bush era, or making art in the Bush era, is that the Gen X art of the Clinton era was very, to listen to shit, and I love this music, but to listen to shit like, anything from the grunge era or Rage Against the Machine or anything like that, anything that was, anti-establishment in the 90s, when you listen to it in the 2000s, you just kind of feel like, buddy, you don't understand. You're pointing to a functional, liberal democratic government and going like, this is just such a fucking broken system. And you're like, buddy, it's going to break so much more. And it sort of feels like when you look at what we tried to do post 9/11, it was like a lot of people were still trying to carry that same tone and that same 90s MTV angst.
Right.
And it's like, well, that doesn't apply here. And what makes it interesting and what makes They Live so interesting is that anybody that tried, there's so much anti-Reagan shit that you can look up that never landed. There was Rock Against Reagan and shit like that, but it didn't matter because it was all 70s radicals who were applying their Nixon approach to Reagan, and it doesn't work. Carpenter is the only one who saw that for the Reagan administration and what neoconservatism meant. What Carpenter does in They Live is he's looking at it as a totally unique beast.
For sure.
It's not Nixon. It's a new thing. And what we failed to do during the Bush era, the George W. Bush era, is recognize it as a new thing. We failed to recognize.
I just want to be clear that none of the things that you guys are saying, is falling on deaf ears, nor do I think that this film is not rich in what it's trying to say. I think that this film is made by very smart people and it's a very smart commentary. I think, unfortunately, for me, there are stylistic choices and there is sort of the just sort of, quite frankly, the superficialness of the format of a film that just I struggled with. And I hear you, Kenny, on why Roddy Piper is, metatextually, logistically a great idea. I have a tough time with him in the movie. Like, I watch his performance and it just feels, like a wrestler became the lead in the movie.
Okay. So, I mean, it was Roddy Piper, and he's an interesting kind of wrestling guy anyway.
I'm sure. But, and there's a context I don't have. So
yeah, no. And you don't need it. Like, it's not really relevant.
But he doesn't play Roddy. He doesn't play himself in They Live. They really tone his thing down in the movie.
I don't doubt that for sure.
It's just funny because in the beginning of The Rock's career, they were doing similar things with him, where they were weaponizing him as a wrestler. The one I'm thinking of course, is Southland Tales. Where
even the Rundown to some degree feels
all the stuff where he was playing, the lead. That's one thing. Yeah. But the only real they try to be cool a little bit to undercut it.
Yeah.
But really, Southland Tales, it was a choice, a Verhoeven-esque choice to cast this larger than life person in that role. And I think Richard Kelly has spoken about that. I will always be kind of, obviously, for obvious reasons, open to this kind of outside the box casting, whether it's this or, very excited about Simon Rex and Red Rocket. Like, that kind of shit will always fucking speak to me. But
and Tangerine as well. I mean, that's a big Sean Baker thing, is sort of taking people.
I love the Simon Rex thing for the same reason I love the Ben Affleck thing. Like, there's a lot baked into this guy that is about to come out that really excites me.
I'm just going to throw one more thing out there with regard to Live, which is this. And I know you're saying it's not falling on deaf ears or anything like that. And I'm not saying if you watch it again, you're going to suddenly go, I love this. But what I would say is that it's kind of like, I'm going to name two albums, if I may, for a second, which is For Emma Forever Ago by Bon Iver and Tonight's the Night by Neil Young. They're two albums that, if you listen to them without any context, it's very easy to go, this is kind of dreary. This is kind of boring. This is kind of samey. This is whatever. And maybe and maybe that's it. And maybe you still don't like the music. But if you go in, again, knowing the context and knowing that this is, in both cases, not just, it's not a refined album of songwriting. It is a guy just grieving into a fucking microphone.
Right.
Even if you don't come away, going, I love Neil Young now, you're not going to be tapping your toes. But the next time you put that album on, knowing that, and you hear him aching out that tonight's the night, and you're like, oh, his friends all just died within weeks of this. Or Bon Iver and all of the stuff he went through from forever ago. Go to it again with that context, and even if you don't feel
I have no doubt that I will.
Product,
I have no doubt that everything you guys have said when I watch this film again in the future will resonate. So
you said when?
Yeah, it's a primal scream. That's what you have to appreciate it for.
Let's rate this movie so you guys can go to sleep. And
holy fuck, it's almost
what time it is, guys.
I ain't tired. Yeah. Fuck it. Let's.
I got a whole AEW Rampage to watch.
Oh, that's right. You do, don't you? So okay, I'm going to rate this film. Never saw it before this podcast. I was at a 68 for The Dream Child. I'm down a little bit. I'm at a 63 now, but I still think The Dream Child is it's a romp, guys. So, Tom, you seem to have thoughts.
Number one, seeing your ranking on Twitter means that you think that New Nightmare is lower than a 68, which you've forgotten the face of your father, my friend.
But here's what I'll say. You make a very good point there, Tom. I honestly think there's a relatively flat scale here for me until they kind of really drop off a cliff a little bit near the end. So I would say that New Nightmare, which is only below this film, I'd say is probably in the same, around in the mid 60s. Maybe low 70s.
I think if we did a podcast like it's 1990, what was it? 4?
94. Which we might very well do.
I think we could talk you up a little bit.
I don't doubt that. I mean, you just have to remember, guys, like this is not my shit. Like this is my first foray into this stuff, and I'm just like,
that has the best. It has the best shot in any. And one of my favorite scenes in any of these movies, which is when Robert Englund comes out dressed as Freddy, surprises her, and the shot through the light with the audience and everyone cheering him is so awesome.
See, my favorite scene in the entire movie is when the third act is kicking into gear and she's talking to John Saxon, and then halfway through the conversation, you realize he's now playing Sheriff Thompson again, and she's like, wait. And then she looks around and she realizes she's on the set of she's back in front of the blue door, not the red door. It's blue in the first one, on Elm Street. I love that shit. And it's like Kenny said, it's fucking adaptation, but with Freddy Krueger. That should 100% be your shit, Phil.
I think it is.
It is. I didn't dislike the movie, guys. You got to understand that, like, I don't like horror movies. I really cannot be any clearer about this, that this is just not my bag. So like even the best versions of these things are only going to be like in maybe the 70s.
Okay, but see, that's the thing.
I want to do my ranking real fast.
Yes,
let's go to bed.
And then I'll do mine.
As I said to Phil, my hot take is they're all good. I like every one of them.
I don't think that's a hot take. I agree. They're all good.
So I was actually at a 65 before this. I like every one of these films. I think the first one is well into the 90s. I think New Nightmare's around a 90. I really, really like these films. I'm going to stay at a 65. I would turn this on. I'd be happy to watch this film. So, I think they're all good, including 2. Next.
Okay.
Wait, did Tom do his ranking?
No,
I'll go after Mike.
No, you go, Tom. You go first, and I'll bring it all home.
Okay, I've seen this because I'm a horror fan, and this is the curse of being a horror fan. I've watched this movie I don't like a lot in my life. Every time I think, oh, this will be the time I like it. Nope, never happened. So I'd say probably the first time I saw it when I was in middle school, I would have given it, because it had murder in it. I would have been like, yeah, it's whatever. It's like a 65. Watching it. Listen, I was an angry little fucking fat white boy.
I get it.
I'm lucky. I'm lucky I'm not a fucking incel. Let's be real. Before this podcast, I would have given it a 45.
Okay.
After this podcast, I'm going down to a 40. I really don't like this movie. I think it's lifeless. I think it's joyless. I think it wastes any potential it has with the Dream Child idea. I think, honestly,
you're my dream child, Tom.
Oh, thanks, Daddy. I think Englund is honestly feels like he's kind of checked out. And I think if I, depending on my mood, this might be the one I like the least. But then,
all right.
But then I throw on 6 and I realize, oh no, I'd rather stub my toe than get like my foot chopped off. So
I love how much you hate 6. All right, Tom. Mike, go ahead.
So, couple things. One, I just want to say off the bat. Do you know what throws
whole thing?
Do you know what? Christ. No, I just want to say, Phil. Do you know what I think throws all of us? At least throws me. Whenever you say I'm not a horror guy, and we go, that doesn't make sense. Because it's just like every time you go, I'm not a horror guy, I always go back to, yes, but you did adapt one of the foundational American horror stories.
I understand.
And multiple other horror stories, too.
But you have to...
It's kind of your bag.
My definition of horror differs from what your definitions of horror might very well be. I don't like being scared, and I don't find Sleepy Hollow scary. So if I don't find it scary, then I'm probably into it. But I don't like feeling gross and horrible. I cannot be any clearer about why the horror genre just does not speak to me. I don't like murder.
You don't like being scared. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I love being scared. I live for it.
I know you and your son. It makes you feel. It makes
you brave.
It makes you brave. All right, Mike.
So okay,
I've become a brave boy.
Take us home.
When I first
my
saw
brave
it,
little toaster.
When I first saw it, I would probably have given it a 30. I really did not like Dream Child the first time I saw it, and I expected to not like it this time. Tom and I were going back and forth about how everybody picked the wrong film out of the 3. But on rewatch, I would bump it all the way up to a 62. I had a lot more fun with Dream Child than I thought I could.
My man. That's my man.
After this podcast,
my other Dream Child.
How much would you give the novelization?
Oh, I would bump that shit up to a 70, 75. It's fun as hell.
That's what I figured.
And you got to buy that secondhand. Anyway, after this podcast, I would drop it down to a 58. Okay. In discussing it, well, because it's like I was on the high of like, oh, this was really fun, but then like, yeah, there are some technical problems. There are some things that are inescapable, and they're unavoidable. So I would drop it down to a 58, and that's where I'd put it.
Guys, this has been amazing. We've covered a lot of ground. It's been a blast. We can't wait to have you both back either together or individually in the future for any number of films or Jimmy Buffett. We're seeing a Jimmy Buffett beach house.
You already agreed to it, Phil. You already agreed to it. I'm not. Yeah,
I never.
I think you wrote a check that only you can cash, buddy.
Rob,
I did agree. I agreed to Rob Zombie with. With
yeah,
Tom.
let's do Rob Zombie. You want to do fucking Dracula?
One of my go-to karaoke songs. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's 99.
We'll do it about one song. It's right around there.
We do about the video. We do about Rob Zombie in general.
I think there were videos, right, Tom?
99. His two single/music videos are "Living Dead Girl" and "Super Beast." Dracula was 98, but it'll come up in the conversations, and then we'll get to talk about his movies. And
I can't wait to talk about Robert Cummings and his work.
I just want a video of Phil watching a Rob Zombie movie. Just camera right to his face and just watching Otis Driftwood cutting people's faces off.
All right. Well, maybe that happens. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we just talk about his music. Either way, we greatly appreciate you guys joining us. And this has been a fucking blast.
And check out You're Missing Out Season 2 whenever it happens.
Yes, please.
It seems like I'm alled to still do it. So
you should absolutely. All right, guys.
Yeah, I guess that's something with
Good night.
Good night, guys.
Podcast like it. You wanna